Tonight opens like a quiet door that leads you on another journey, one that we walk together slowly and deeply. In the midst of the gentle darkness, there is something waiting for you, the hidden keys of renunciation, the ancient pieces of wisdom handed down through countless generations of Zen masters who have discovered the art of achieving peace as gentle as breathing. And before we embark on that journey, I invite you to relax, to let me know where you are spending this time, so that we can sit down in the same moment, in the same stillness. I've spent years collecting rare stories, pieces of wisdom that most modern humans have lost in the midst of a whirlwind of ambition and fear. These stories are created not only to hear, but to feel, to see themselves in every breath of the characters, to explore the art of liberating the spirit and emotions that our ancestors once understood so well. Each story is a guiding thread, pulling you out of the tangled emotional mess of anxiety, frustration, and never-ending streams of thought. They are not advice, not a dry philosophy. They are experiences, experiences to touch the deepest part of you. And perhaps the greatest mystery lies in this. The freedom we seek all our lives does not come from gaining more, but from the ability to let go so easily and easily. The Buddha taught that the root of all suffering is attachment, the ability to cling to things that are never fixed. Tonight, as you listen to these timeless stories, I believe you will feel yourself gradually loosening the invisible cords that have gripped your mind for so long, and realize that peace has always been present within you, just waiting to be awakened. Maybe as you listen, a small change will gradually appear, as light as the night breeze passing through the roof. The invisible burden you've been carrying on your shoulders for a long time may become a little lighter. Your incessant inner conversations can soften down, as if their footsteps are sinking into the soft grass, and you can feel yourself drifting, slowly, smoothly, into a state of deep clarity where the body is rested and the soul is healed. So right now, sit or lie still. Let your body melt into whatever is supporting it. Take a slow breath with me, feeling the air come in and spread, and as you exhale, let all the stress accordingly dissipate. Ancient teachings always come to us at the right time when we need it most. And tonight, they come to you too. Now let us drift into the first story, the story of the true nature of wealth and burden. Once upon a time, there was a Zen master who traveled all over the countryside, carrying only a flimsy old cloth bag. He didn't possess much, but every step he took was as light as a cloud. Every breath was full of contentment. Everyone who met him on the street was attracted by the peace that radiated from him, an exuberance so majestic that one felt that he carried nothing but the sky. One afternoon, as he traveled to a prosperous village, a wealthy merchant approached him. The merchant was famous in the region for his vast fortune, but even from a distance, one could see the anxiety on his forehead. When he bowed his head to the Zen master, his eyes were red from sleepless nights. "Sir," said the merchant in a trembling voice, "I have everything that the world thinks is desirable: gold and silver, land, fine clothes, servants. But my mind was always confused. I was scared, suspicious, always living in the worry of losing what I had. Please tell me the secret that makes it possible for you to live such a simple life and still be in peace." The Zen master smiled, his eyes gleaming with childish mischief. "So let's talk for a day," he said. "You give me the most precious thing you have, and I will give you the most precious thing I have. But at dusk, we have to give them back to each other." The merchant was confused, but then was led by curiosity. He agreed. With trembling hands, he opened the leather bag that had followed him since he was a young man and held out a heavy bag full of gold coins, the treasure he considered the soul of his life. The Zen master accepted it gently and reached into the old cloth bag at his side. He pulled out a diamond, a stone so beautiful that the merchant was stunned. The afternoon sunlight shone on it, creating sparks as bright as stars trapped in the glass. The merchant held the stone in a daze. It was worth more than his fortune. His heart pounded with excitement. But that joy only lasts for a moment. After just a few breaths, excitement turned to terror. The diamond is too precious to put down, too precious to trust anyone else. Every person who passes by becomes a potential thief. Every dark corner becomes a danger. He held the stone so tightly that his hands went numb, and every minute that passed, his mind seemed to be torn apart. All that day, he lived in suffocating vigilance. His body seemed to be locked in a cage built by himself. When the sun had just touched the horizon, the merchant hurriedly ran to the Zen master, who was still sitting calmly under a large tree. He held out the diamond with both hands, almost crying with relief. "Please, sir, please take it back. I can't bear this burden." The Zen master received the stone with the same calmness as when he gave it to him. Then he also returned the bag of gold to the merchant. At that moment, the merchant felt the pressure on his chest dissipate. He took his first deep breath of the day. "The lesson," the Zen master said softly, "is not in the diamond, it's in his relationship to it." He did not carry a diamond. He carried the fear of losing it. True wealth is not in the treasures, but in the ability to hold them lightly and let them go when the time comes. The Buddha once taught, "You only lose what you cling to." And the merchant realized it better than ever. We suffer not because of lack or because of too much, but because of a desperate attachment to things whose nature is always changing. Zen Buddhism says that the ego seeks a sense of security by accumulating, controlling, gathering. We think, if we have more money, more love, more success, we will be safe. But this only makes us prisoners of our own property. The more we have to lose, the more we live in fear. And this happens everywhere in our modern lives. We work hard to get a promotion, and then we live in stress because we are afraid of not being able to hold that position. We love someone with all our hearts, and then suffocate them for fear that they will leave. We buy a nice house for peace, and then we lose sleep because of the loan and the changing market price. Everything that used to be fun gradually becomes a burden just because we cling to it. Zen master Suzuki Roshi once said, "Each one of you is perfect in his own way, and you can use a little bit of improvement." Hidden in that seemingly funny quote is an important truth. Life doesn't require you to give up everything, nor does it require you to cling to it. What you need is a balance between appreciation and letting go, between love and freedom. The diamond in the story is the image of every gift in life: love, family, experience, accomplishment, even breath. They are given in the palm of our hand for us to enjoy, but not for us to lock. When we hold on too tightly, joy is stifled. When we let go too soon, we lose them. But when we hold them with an open hand, they become beautiful moments that don't need to be owned. Pema Chodron says that the root of suffering comes from the opposition to the fact that everything is impermanent. The merchant suffers not because of the diamond, but because he resists the uncertainty that comes with it. The fear of loss swallowed up the joy. Letting go doesn't mean becoming apathetic or cold. Letting go means developing an unknowing mind, an open state that accepts everything as it is, not requiring it to stay or leave. When we live in this way, all treasures, whether physical or spiritual, become light. And we can enjoy them much more fully. Tonight, as you allow your mind to touch things that you may have held too tightly for a long time, try asking yourself, can you loosen your hand a little? Maybe it's the savings account you're worried about, the state of a relationship you're trying to protect so badly, the career trajectory that you think will fall apart just a little bit, or even the self-image you're trying to define and control every little detail. So what if you still cherish all those gifts, but don't squeeze them anymore? If you love with lightness, what if you aim for your goal, but don't let it bind you? As the Buddha once taught, ultimately life revolves around three things: how well we have lived, how well we have loved, and how well we have learned to let go. Everything else is just a faint layer of dust on the water. The next story opens the door that leads us to a place where clinging to past moments creates suffering. Once upon a time, there was a provincial governor, a man accustomed to living in the reverence of the people and absolute power. He visited a famous Zen master, hoping for guidance. But deep down, he was still the arrogance of someone who always believed he was important. When they sat down in the teacher's simple room, the governor began to talk endlessly about his power and influence, about the great responsibilities, about the complex problems of the state. His voice was full of pride, mixed with a hint of complacency, as if he needed to be affirmed that he was an indispensable person in this world. The Zen master still sat silently, only smiling slightly, his smile never wavering in the face of the governor's boasting or self-exaltation. After a while, the waiter walked in with a tray of hot tea. Each movement was slow and careful, like a ritual. He filled the teacher's cup first with his calm hands, then moved on to pour tea for the governor. But at that moment, a small fly flew out of nowhere, buzzing in the air like an uncertain thread, and then suddenly rushed straight into the pouring tea, falling into the governor's cup. The change in the governor's face took place in the blink of an eye. The red color of anger spread to his face like flames. He punched the table so hard that the cups rattled. "How dare you serve me this filthy tea?" he roared to the waiter, his voice overwhelming the small room. "This is a blatant insult to my position. Punish this fool immediately." The Zen master was still sitting there, as calm as the surface of a lake without ripples. He gently lifted his teacup, took a slow sip, and set it down. His eyes were on the governor. No blame, no criticism, only deep compassion. "That fly," he said in a voice as clear as water, "had no intention of offending you. It just flies like any fly would fly. Tea didn't deliberately accept it either. Tea is simply hot water in a cup, and the cup wasn't meant to hold it either. It is just a container. Each of these things is just doing what it is." The teacher paused, letting the words seep into the heavy silence of the room. The fly is dead. Tea is no longer drinkable. That moment has passed. But why? The Zen master tilted his head slightly. Did he choose to keep it alive in his mind? Why carry that little corpse with you for the rest of the day? The governor was like being hit by an invisible blow. He sat motionless, feeling the heat in his chest gradually dissipate, like a dam being opened to let the flow slowly recede. At that moment, he realized the unpleasant truth. He was not angry with the fly, not because of the cup of tea, but because he himself refused to let the moment pass. He holds it up, binding it in his mind as evidence of insult. The Buddha once taught, holding on to anger is like holding a piece of embers with the intention of throwing it at someone else. But the one who gets burned is you. This story reveals a strange habit that almost all of us have. We perpetuate suffering by holding on to things that should have died in time. Why do we cling to grievances? Zen explains that the ego needs to feel right, important, offended. When things don't go as expected, the ego immediately weaves a story. This is wrong. Someone is against me. The world is unfair to me. We repeat the story over and over again until we forget that it's just a flimsy idea, like a little fly that accidentally falls into a cup of tea. In daily life, flies appear everywhere. A driver cuts you off, an unanswered message, a thoughtless comment, a coffee cup was spilled, a small computer error. It's all just fleeting phenomena, like a cloud that floats for a few seconds and then dissolves into the sky. They are not meant to cling to you. But many times, it is you who cling to them. You replay the conversation from noon. You think of a quote that makes you narcissistic. You argue in your head again. An argument is over. Things that would have lasted only a few seconds last for hours, even days, because you unconsciously keep them alive in your mind. Vietnamese Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh once taught, "Thanks to impermanence, everything is possible." The governor's seemingly solid anger is also a temporary phenomenon. His anguish did not come from the event that happened, but from a desperate attempt to hold on to the moment in a state of immutability. Practicing letting go doesn't mean ignoring the problem or letting others offend you. It just means knowing when a moment has ended, when an emotion has finished the task, when a story has come to dissolve. If the waiter needs to learn how to pour tea more carefully, then that can be solved by practical action, not by carrying anger with him throughout the day. Meditation teaches about mano no aware, a deep awareness of the temporality of things. Even frustration is just passersby. It comes, stays for a while, and then leaves, if we don't hold on to it with attention. And tonight, in this stillness, when you realize your mind is drifting about something that has been bothering you during the day, a saying, a look, a small incident, you can ask yourself, is this fly really alive? Or am I carrying its corpse in my teacup? Can you allow that moment to die in time? Can you let it fall into the past where it belongs? Because as the Buddha taught, don't live in the past. Don't dream about the future. Bring your mind to the present moment, where all burdens can be laid down, where you are free from the little flies that have been unwittingly but have been held back in your mind for too long. In the journey of discovering the path of letting go and spiritual abundance, there is a story that is often referred to as a gentle but poignant reminder of the nature of loss and how the human mind reacts to things that are taken away. The story revolves around Rion, a poet who lives in seclusion at the foot of Mount Kugami, who spends most of his life in a small rough pine hut, where the wind rushes through the bamboo rows, and where the dawn spills down in a pale yellow like honey. For many, it's just a poor roof, but for Rioan, it is a refuge of freedom and tranquility, where he sees all the changes of nature as living pages. He didn't have much, but he never saw himself as lacking. His life is an expansive poem, written with the breath of mountains and forests, and with eyes that look at the world with an attitude of acceptance instead of possession. Every spring, when the weather begins to warm up and the snow and ice from the distant mountain peaks dissipate, young bamboo shoots sprout around his hut. These sprouts for him are not only food or items of nature, but symbolize the beginning for the miraculous cycle of life. Every day he bent down to watch them grow taller and taller, just like a parent watching a child's growth. Bamboo shoots became an intimate part of his spring, like the silent companion he cherished with an affectionate gaze. It can be said that it is this subtle happiness that nourishes his soul, no less than the poems he writes or the sermons he shares. One particular morning in the spring of that year, Rion left his hut and went down to a nearby village to preach the doctrine to the farmers who loved him. The mountain road led him through arches of young leaves, through damp rocks and small streams flowing beneath his feet. He walked slowly, step by step, as if talking to the earth, to the trees, to the sky. The air is rare, cool, and clean, filled with the sound of birds returning from winter. During the lecture, he spoke to the people in a calm voice, as if the words came not from consciousness, but from a deeper place, the direct experience of a person who has lived every moment fully in simplicity. As he spoke, everyone's faces softened, as if they were being washed away from their daily worries. In the afternoon, as the light gradually tilted over the mountain and the yellow of the sunset stained the trees, Rioan returned to the hut. He still walked leisurely. His heart was as light as the wind at the beginning of the season. But when he arrived, he stopped. The ground around the hut had been loosened. The small holes were still fresh, and all the bamboo shoots he watched every day were gone. There is no trace of anything but empty spaces like the stories that have ended abruptly. A student who had accompanied him had gone to the hut earlier and witnessed the scene. As soon as Rioan appeared, the student immediately showed his indignation. His cheeks flushed, and he breathed heavily, as if he was holding back an anger that did not belong to him but was too strong to stop. "Master," he exclaimed, "someone stole your bamboo shoots. Those bamboo shoots that you love. We must find him immediately and demand compensation from him. Or at least it must be made clear that he has done something wrong. He has robbed you of your spring joy." Rian was still standing there, looking down at the disturbed land. There was no sign of anger or disappointment in his eyes. There is only a deep peace, like a calm lake reflecting the dawn. He was silent for a long time, as if listening to the invisible whispers of the earth. Then, finally, he looked up, looking at his student with bright eyes as if hiding a slight smile. "Yes," he said, "the bamboo shoots are gone." He just said that. His voice was even and did not tremble. Then he gently raised his hand to the west, where the sun was sinking behind the mountains, leaving a brilliant streak of orange and purple that no painter could fully reproduce. "But look there, twilight, then he can't steal." The words fell like a drop of water to the surface of the student's mind, neat, light, but spread out in wide waves. It's not just an answer to the theft, it is a lesson in the nature of all loss, that what can be taken away is never the foundation of true happiness. People often define their happiness by what they own, what they have in their hands, the results they expect. And when those things are gone, they feel like a part of themselves is also being withdrawn. In this confusion, they no longer see the greater gifts that still exist around them, things that no one can take away because they do not belong to them, but to life itself. The Buddha once taught that if we let go a little, we can find a little peace. If we let go more, there will be greater peace. And if we let go of the whole, we will have an unshakable peace. Rian's story is a vivid testament to that truth. He did not stop himself from feeling what had happened, but he also did not let it dominate his entire perception. The loss of bamboo shoots is just a small event in the endless flow of life, while the sunset before him is a festival of light and time, unpossessable but always visible, as long as our minds are not tied to what has been lost. The human mind, on the other hand, often chooses the opposite path. After each loss, we let the absence spread and take over the perception, as if that little hole were the whole picture. When a plan is canceled, we cling to what is lost instead of enjoying the free time we create. When someone doesn't love us anymore, we only see the lack of it, forgetting that the affection from friends and family is still rising like rivers that never run out. We are constantly looking at the emptiness of what once existed, and in that gaze we ignore the whole world that is giving gifts. The missing bamboo shoots symbolize the attachments that people form: expectations, possessions, fame, special relationships, or goals that we think must be achieved at all costs. They are natural, even beautiful, but suffering begins when we think that our lives are just them. When we believe that happiness depends entirely on keeping it, any change becomes pain. But from the perspective of meditation, everything that exists is impermanent, and it is that impermanence that creates the beauty of life. The bamboo shoots grow. The bamboo shoots are picked. The spring comes and goes. Everything changes, and not because life is cruel, but because change is the moving picture of the universe. If the neighbor really takes the bamboo shoots, he does not steal from the Rioan spring, for the spring is not in the few bamboo shoots. Spring lies in the wind, in the sun, in the eyes of the beholder. No one can steal things that don't belong to anyone, like the sunset, like the change of the weather, like the ability to feel beauty. That's why Zen Buddhism emphasizes that true wealth comes from opening up rather than holding. When our hands are full of old things, we cannot receive new gifts. When our minds are blocked by what is lost, we cannot see what remains. In relationships, the scarcity mentality makes people become possessive, afraid of loss, afraid of being replaced. They believe that love is limited, so it must be protected as the protection of wealth. But love is not the same as money or possessions. It's like light. Sharing doesn't diminish it. It only makes it more widespread. The person who can rejoice in the happiness of others is the one who knows that joy is not a limit. Just like the sunset, anyone can see it, anyone can receive, and it doesn't go away just because many people are watching it. Alan Watts once said that when we cling to something, we close in on everything else. But when we open up, we can take in the myriad of things that life has to offer. Rion's students only saw the loss of bamboo shoots, so they could no longer see the sunset. The indignation blinded his eyes to beauty. And in that state, he was actually the one who lost more. Not because the thief had taken the bamboo shoots, but because his own mind had stolen the ability to enjoy the moment. Letting go, therefore, is not passivity or accepting the wrong. It is the realization that there are things that need to be addressed realistically, but nothing is worth sacrificing for inner peace. If we need to teach our neighbor a lesson in courtesy, we can do it with a clear spirit, not carrying a storm in our hearts. But before we act, we need to know that the emotion of anger is only a temporary guest, coming and going. When we don't feed it with attention, it will dissolve on its own. Zen master Dogen once said that studying the Buddhist path is studying oneself, and studying oneself is forgetting oneself. When we forget the little self that is often lost, we realize that the larger self is connected to all, beyond the boundaries that the mind sets. From that realm, the neighbor is not a thief, but a part of the give and take flow of the universe. Bamboo shoots are taken away not as a robbery, but as a movement of life. And the sunset is still there, forever beyond all the lost stories. Jack Kornfield once said that in the end, there are only three things that matter: how we lived, how we loved, and how we learned to let go. Rion did not give verbal lectures. His story is a life teaching, expressed in an attitude so gentle that the loss cannot be touched. He did not deny reality, but he also did not let reality limit him. He saw the loss of bamboo shoots, but he also saw the sunset. And he chose the sunset. That is wisdom. And the student in that moment learned something that perhaps years later he felt deeply, that there is a way of life that is larger than the way we usually choose, a way of looking at things that are not bound by change. One can look at loss and beauty at the same time, and not let one side cover the other. Life always has both, but our minds often choose only one. Rion showed him the way to see the whole picture, to see the inherent richness of life. And so, Rion's story is not just about a few stolen bamboo shoots. It's a story about the look, about how people often lose the richness around them just because they are busy looking at the empty space. About being able to live to the fullest, that loss is no longer a loss. It's about whether we have the right to choose where to put our attention, on what is past or on what is continuing to rise. At the end of the day, the sunset still comes no matter who takes the bamboo shoots, no matter what life brings. And for those who know how to let go, the sunset is not just color, it is freedom. Tonight, as the night slowly falls and a trail of the end of the day lingers in the sky, you may be thinking about something that life has inadvertently taken from you. A belief that was once so sure, an opportunity that seemed to belong to you. Part of the health is gone, or simply time never returns. It's often easier for people to look at the gaps lost than at what still exists. But if at this moment, as long as you lift your eyes, do you see that the sky is silently offering you a sunset that no circumstance can fade? How much beauty is still there, not stolen, not deprived, not clouded by the vicissitudes of human life? The Buddha once reminded that peace does not come from a perfect external arrangement. It rises from within when we see the present moment with eyes that are no longer covered. Peace comes from within. Don't look for it outside. It is not meant to soothe pain, but to illuminate the way we look at life, to look directly at what remains, not at what is lost. And it seems that as a further reminder of that, there is another story about the invisible prison of perfectionism and about freedom that has been there from the beginning, but that we are so easily forgotten. The story begins with the footsteps of a young sculptor, a talented, ambitious young man with a heart that always aspires to create a work that can stand the test of time. He traveled hundreds of miles to a famous monastery where the Buddha statues were so vivid that they seemed to contain the soul of peace. Each of their carvings not only exudes ingenuity, but also carries with it a quality that is hard to name, a presence that makes the person in front of them feel smaller, quieter, and reflected on the deepest inner. When he met the old Zen master, who had made most of the Buddha statues, the young sculptor bowed his head deeply, as if bowing to a secret he had been pursuing for half his life. "Master," he said, his voice full of respect and worry, "I have learned the anatomy to the point of memorizing every contour of the human body. I used all kinds of tools and practiced until my hands mastered all movements. You also get the best marble that money can buy. And yet, I still can't start. I am afraid that I will create a work that is not worthy of the vision I have in my head. I'm afraid the first cut will ruin the perfection I imagined." The teacher listens with a patience like compassion crystallized into human form. Without saying anything, he stood up and motioned for the boy to follow. They walked through the workshop, where the evening light shone on the dust particles floating like fragments of time falling slowly. Then he stopped in a hidden corner that perhaps no one had noticed for a long time. That place, covered with dust, was a large block of wood, neither beautiful nor bad, nothing outstanding. "It's just a block of wood so ordinary that it's easy to get mixed up in the dark." "What do you see?" he asked in a voice so soft that it seemed to be carried away by the wind. "Yes, it's just a piece of wood," the boy replied, somewhat disappointed. He smiled, touching his hand lightly to the rough, dusty surface, as if stroking the face of an old friend. "This piece of wood," he said, "I've kept it for 40 years. He paused, his eyes flashing with nostalgia. "My age is the same as my child, and I am also full of ambition and ambition in my heart. At that time, we carry in our minds the image of the most perfect Buddha statue, a statue that we believe will amaze the world. I searched everywhere to find a block of wood worthy of that vision. Then I finally found this wood. I believe it's perfect, but we also know that we are not good enough to create the image we have in mind. That's why I decided to wait." He continued slowly, his voice even but sad. "I think it's only a few more years. We will practice more, cultivate more, and one day we will be worthy of touching it. But as the years passed, our skills really increase, but so does the vision in our heads of perfection. Every time we improve, we find that our ideal image is even more perfect than before, farther than before. And then I don't dare touch the wood anymore. I'm afraid of ruining my dreams. I'm afraid of breaking the perfect image I've cultivated in my heart." He looked directly into the eyes of the young student. His old but bright eyes seemed to see what was in his mind. "Do you see? That perfection. It's a beautiful prison. The Buddha is not waiting at the end of the path for you to become worthy. He was present at the first cut, the very moment I dared to let go of my dream of perfection and face the real wood in front of me." Then he put his hand on the boy's shoulder. "Go and ruin my marble. It is only through the courage to start imperfectly that you can discover what is at stake." That sentence, for the young sculptor, seemed to open a whole gap in his heart. And for anyone who hears it, it's probably easy to recognize a deeper truth. Perfectionism is more than just a fear of doing wrong. It's a sophisticated form of attachment, a kind of spiritual materialism. We use lofty ideals, dreams that are so round to hide a more painful truth. We are afraid of returning to our original fragility, afraid of the embarrassment of beginners, afraid that failure will prove that we are unworthy. Perfectionism is the fence that the ego erects to avoid getting hurt. He whispered, "Wait a little longer. Prepare a little more. When it is perfect enough, you begin." But what the ego tries to hide is this: if we keep waiting, we will never start, because our vision will always be one step ahead of our ability. And so we live forever in the future, in a time zone that doesn't exist, where everything will happen, but nothing is happening. The truth is that every master has had early works that make them blush if they look back. Everyone who writes has pages of rough manuscripts. Every artist has drafts that are never complete. Every parent has times when they say the wrong thing to their children. Everyone who meditates has their minds scattered. No one becomes a master by waiting for perfect enough. They become masters by allowing themselves to be imperfect countless times. The young sculptor isn't the only one stuck. In modern life, his image is repeated everywhere. The one who wants to write a novel but never writes the first sentence because there is no perfect plot yet. One hesitates to meditate for fear that he cannot sit still long enough. People buy expensive paintings but do not dare to use them for fear of waste. The cherished person who opened a business but always edited the plan instead of starting. The father and mother wait for the perfect time to talk to the child while the child grows day by day. They all kept a waiting block of wood in their hearts, and that block of wood is always covered with dust. Going deeper, there is a hidden fear that many people dare not name. The fear of being seen as normal, being seen as human, being seen as easy to mistake. We live in a culture that measures value by achievements, by excellence, by impressions. We forget that human worth does not come from being perfect, but from being present, from daring to enter life with our true imperfections. The wood bush in the monastery is a symbol of each person's unlived potential. Every time I delay for fear of imperfection, another layer of dust covers the wood. And time, as Dogen teaches, does not separate us. It passes with me, not waiting for me. All I really have is just this moment, this wood in my hand, this current skill. And then, when we realize that, we seem to understand Suzuki Roshi's words. In the mind of a beginner, there are always countless possibilities. In the mind of the expert, these possibilities are narrowed by the fear of being wrong, the fear of losing face, the fear of not being enough. Imperfection is not the enemy. It is from this that creativity emerges. It is from there that the truth comes out. Not endless preparation, but commitment. The Buddha does not exist in the perfect image that we try to hold on to. It exists in the living relationship between our hands and the material waiting to be touched. It exists in the first chisel, albeit clumsily, in the cracking sound of the first piece of wood, though not as expected, in each time we make mistakes and correct them. It lives in the courage of action, not in the immobility of dreaming. Just like the sunset you might be seeing out there, it doesn't have to be perfect to be beautiful. And this life either never requires you to be perfect before you start. As long as you are brave enough to put the first cut into your own wood, the hidden beauty within you will find its way to manifest itself. The dialogue between man and life always takes place as a constant flow, where vision collides with reality, where aspiration merges with acceptance, and where great intentions sometimes bow to the simple nature of the present moment. When we let go of our need for perfection, we can truly begin to exist, because perfection always places us in a future that has not yet arrived, while life can only exist fully at this moment. Tonight, when you look back at yourself and see that the creative impulses have been delayed, not because you lack the ability, but because you are waiting for some ideal condition, can you try to start a small, really small step, however clumsy it may be? A rough sentence, an awkward action, a conversation you've avoided for fear of the wrong time. How would you feel if you tried to let go of the illusion of a perfection that never existed and simply respond to the moment in front of you with the same skill and courage that you really have? The Buddha once taught that we should not believe something just because we have heard it many times, or because it is revered through tradition. But after observing, considering, and seeing that it is reasonable and beneficial to ourselves and others, then we should really live according to it. Therefore, all paths to enlightenment begin from direct experience, from living fully in each breath without being obsessed with the past or expectations of what is to come. The journey through Zen wisdom has always been a journey of letting go, and perhaps there is no better story that exposes the nature of letting go than the story of the ancient Zen master lying on his dying bed, his breath weakening like a lamp about to go out. For decades, he has been a spiritual pillar for many who seek clarity. In each of his teachings, he touches the deepest layers of consciousness, helping students see their own nature. But as the final moment approached, his disciples, who had been attached to the path all their lives, felt a surge of anxiety. They fear that the light of the teacher's wisdom will be extinguished with this body, that they will lose their guide. And so, in the little room where silence was as enveloping as an invisible shroud, they gathered at his bedside, each carrying a glimmer of hope that he would leave behind a final teaching, a condensed grain of wisdom that would help them continue on the long road after he was gone. Their chief monk, with a heart heavy with his impending loss, leaned close to his ear and whispered, "Master, over the years you have given us much wisdom. Before you leave us, please speak one last word, a truth that we can cherish and continue to impart." The teacher's faded eyes slowly opened. He looked at each face, faces full of respect, full of hope, but also full of clinging. They're not just looking for a quote. They look for a fulcrum to hold on to the master in the world. The teacher gathered the last of his remaining strength, like the last drop of oil, and uttered a single word: attention. The word was as light as breath, but fell into the room like a sudden bell. The master stepped back slightly, surprised and disappointed. He waited for something deeper, an erudite philosophy or a verse that could become an eternal spiritual treasure. The word attention sounds too simple, too ordinary for this serious moment. He thought that the teacher was missing something, like the teaching was not complete. And so he whispered, his voice trembling, "Master, is that all? Only attention?" The teacher nodded weakly, then closed his eyes, seemingly stopping there. But the disciple was still not at ease. He leaned deeper, feeling the need to ask for something clearer, more complete, something worthy of a lifetime of teachings that he had given. "Master," he pleaded, "please explain a little more. Can you give us a clearer guideline?" The teacher, with little life left in his dying breath, whispered one last time, "Attention, pay attention." And so he departed, leaving a silence so deep that the disciples felt it like an abyss opened up in the room. No theory, no metaphor, no lecture long enough for them to rely on. Just one word, and also a single universe: attention. At first glance, the teaching is too simple to be the last lesson of an enlightened master. But as the years passed, the disciples realized its profundity. Because, as the Buddha taught, the present moment is the only door to all other moments. Only this moment exists. The past is no longer here. The future has not yet appeared. And all the comments, judgments, and expectations in our minds are just a fog that covers our eyes, preventing us from touching the truth of this moment. Why is it so hard to maintain attention? Because the human mind is like the wild monkey in ancient legends. It constantly jumps from branch to branch, from memory to imagination, from worry to desire, from judgment to regret. In that state, we live as if in a long dream, dreaming of things that have passed or things that may come, but never fully living in what is happening. Disciples desire a teaching that they can keep as treasures, but attention cannot be possessed. It can only be lived. No one keeps it for me. No book gives it to me. No teacher can transmit it to my head. It exists only in each moment when we return to the breath, with our hands touching life, with our eyes looking directly at non-judgmental reality. Paradoxically, that simple thing is the least we do. When we eat, we think of something else. When we walk, we hear the sound from a device instead of our own footsteps. When we talk, we think about what to say next. When we work, we pay attention to things outside of work. Our whole lives are fragmented, broken, stretched pieces of attention that are rarely intact for us to be truly present. And so, the last teaching of the teacher who stopped breathing was not a lofty philosophy, but the most fundamental. Be present. Zen calls it pure phenomena, which is life that is revealing itself without the lens of deduction. Not to pay attention to achieve something, not to pay attention to be better, but simply to pay attention as the nature of awakened life. When you wash the dishes and your mind is there, you are meditating. When you listen to someone with your full presence, you are giving them the most precious gift of all. When you feel the breath coming in and out without repair, without control, you are touching the eternal flow of the now. Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh once said that the most precious gift we can give to others is presence. That presence is not something that we need to practice for decades to achieve. It is already in us, obscured only by layers of thoughts, anxieties, expectations. When we really pay attention, we are returning to our own primitive and pure nature. I live, and perhaps that is why a master, in the last moments of his life, did not choose a complex teaching, but the simplest. Because all paths lead to one point, to return to this moment, to the life that is happening right now. All enlightenment begins with attention. Every letting go starts with paying attention, and all freedom grows from the very moment we open our eyes to life without any filtering. When we stop running away from this moment, when each time we let go of the constant layer of mental commentary that runs around in our heads and comes back to the direct experience that is happening right in front of us, we truly come back to ourselves. The practice of attention, seemingly the simplest, is the most profound challenge that human beings can experience, requires no ritual, no special equipment, or any sublime philosophy. It's as simple as feeling a breath coming in and out, like hearing the wind passing through the leaves, like noticing the changing light on the walls. But it is because of this simplicity that it becomes challenging, because our minds are accustomed to wandering, accustomed to running away from the present moment with thoughts, worries, fantasies, plans, and countless mental activities that never end. The Buddhist teacher Jon Kabat-Zinn once reminded, "Wherever you go, you are there," as an instruction that we cannot escape ourselves by running to another place, because peace or turmoil comes from this mind, right here. The dying words of the Zen master in the ancient story are a profound invitation to stop seeking future enlightenment, to stop believing that wisdom is in books, or that peace will be present when circumstances change. All we need is here, right now, but only if we are fully present with it. Ultimate letting go, as the masters say, is not letting go of a situation or an emotion, but letting go of the person who is trying to let go himself. When we simply pay attention to what is really going on, the breath going in and out of the body, the sounds that arise and then dissipate in the air, the thoughts that appear like bubbles and then burst themselves, we begin to discover that the me is struggling to become enlightened, to achieve a certain special state. It is actually just a mental structure like many other thoughts. Attention is not a means to an end, it is a purpose. It is not a path to awakening, it is awakening. When you are fully attentive, there is no longer an observer and no longer an object to be observed. Only life is going on in its pure wholeness. Tonight, as you prepare to fall asleep, you can try simply focusing entirely on a single thing. It could be the feeling of your head touching the soft pillow, your breathing slowing down, the distant sound of night coming over, or the stillness spreading around you. Can you let go of the need to be somewhere else, become someone else, or have an experience other than this one. Because as the Buddha taught, the mind is everything, what you think you become. Our journey continues like a river flowing through many scenic regions. Now let's move on to another story, the story of acceptance and the art of contentment, the story of the shepherd. On a dusty mountain road covered with traveler footprints, where wildflowers bloom along the hillside and the afternoon wind carries the smell of hay, a tired traveler walks with a heavy backpack. The morning sky is lifting, spreading thin bands of light through the gray clouds that are gathering on the horizon, promising a day that can be light rain, or it can be scorching sun. On a smooth rock beside the path, a shepherd sits still, his eyes watching the sheep grazing leisurely. He has the appearance of someone who has lived his entire life under the open sky, seeing all the changes of the years and learning the lessons that only nature can teach. Patience, insight, and unshakable equanimity. Recognizing the lightness of the blanket's sitting posture, the traveler couldn't help but be attracted. He stopped, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and called, "Good morning, man. What kind of weather will we have today?" The shepherd looked up, his eyes as clear as spring water, and he smiled gently. "The kind of weather I like," he replied, in an even and warm voice, as if he were saying the most obvious thing in the world. The traveler was stunned. He waited for a specific answer, rain, sunshine, or wind, to arrange his itinerary. But instead, the old man said something that didn't look like the weather forecast at all. "How did you know it would be the kind of weather you liked?" he asked, his voice somewhat hurried and curious. The shepherd pointed to the vast sky above them, where the light and dark clouds were moving in the eternal dance of the wind. He smiled deeper and said, "Sir, after realizing that I never got everything I liked, I learned to like whatever I got. So I'm pretty sure we're going to have the kind of weather that I like today." The traveler stood silent. That sentence seeped into him like a stream of cool water in the middle of a sunny day, a simplicity that is profound, a truth that he had wasted his whole life avoiding. That shepherd, through his years of living near earth and heaven, discovered a freedom that all weather predictions, strict plans, or efforts at control could not provide. Freedom from the burden of expectations. As the Buddha taught, attachment is the root of suffering. People burn out not because life is too difficult, but because we are exhausted trying to arrange our lives so that it is as we want. We think we'll be more at peace if things go our way, but the reality is quite the opposite. The more we demand that life fit our expectations, the more insecure we feel. The shepherd did not give up his hobbies, but he did not let them become a barrier to happiness. He is not passive. He just stops fighting the unchangeable. He plowed the fields when the sun was up, took shelter when the rain came, tended the sheep when the wind came up, and he never blamed the sky. His acceptance was not resignation. It is wisdom. Wisdom sees that resistance to reality is a battle that we always lose. Every time we resist what's happening, an unseasonal rain, a person behaves badly, a plan is broken, we create a little rebellion in our minds. Those small rebellions accumulate into constant discontent, making life a long series of frustrations. But when we learn to take lightly our interests, when we allow reality to be itself instead of having to bend with us, we begin to touch peace. Zen master Sengtsan wrote, "The great path is not difficult for people who have no interests." This does not mean suppressing all human desires, but rather not making them a condition for happiness. The shepherd is not insensitive. He loved his sheep, he loved the morning sun and the warmth of good days. But the basis of his contentment does not depend on any circumstance. He was happy because he didn't ask his life to change to please him. Tonight, as you reflect on the things that have happened during the day, the pleasant things, the difficult things, the pleasant things, and even the unexpected, can you try to look at them with the eyes of a shepherd What if satisfaction wasn't a gift that came from luck or circumstance, but a choice that was available right now? What if instead of demanding that life be easy, you tried to love life as it appears? As the Buddha taught, happiness does not depend on what you have or who you are. It depends on what you think. The shepherd has discovered a secret that many people seek all their lives without knowing where to look. When we stop forcing our lives to conform to our expectations, we find the freedom to love life exactly as it is. On the slopes of Mount Kugami in late autumn, when the red maple canopies flutter in the wind blowing from the valley, there is a small winding path that leads to Rion's hut. That path does not seem to belong to time. Every step that a person takes sounds like touching a long-standing silence, a silence that the mountain has preserved for centuries. That day, the afternoon light poured down on the soft orange streaks, highlighting the thin figure of the teacher walking with a cane, slowly and calmly, as if every movement had dissolved into the breath of heaven and earth. Next to him is a student, a young person. His eyes are always full of questions. His shoulders are always tense because of things that cannot be understood and cannot be let go. He followed the teacher, but his mind ran ahead, behind, and around in his own aimless turns. The mountain birds spoke in the distance, each sound as if dropping into space. The afternoon dew began to spread thinly. The student looked at the teacher's steps and suddenly asked a question that had been stirred for a long time. After a while, as if mustering up enough courage, he asked, "Master, why do I have to observe the body in Zen? Why do teachers, from ancient times to the present, always mention the four majestic, walking, standing, lying down, sitting? Why is it not enough to just keep a pure mind?" Rion stopped. He was in no hurry to reply. Just look at the space ahead, where the mountains are gradually sinking in the blue and purple of the late afternoon. After a while, the teacher smiled slightly and asked again, "Tell me, where do you have your mind?" That question was like a light arrow, but it hit the deepest part of him. He was embarrassed. "Yes, heart in me." The teacher asked again, "Where is it in you?" He was silent, unable to answer. The wind blew through the ravine, accompanied by the sound of dry leaves rustling along the trail. The teacher continued, "You said to keep your mind. But what is the mind that holds? Where is the mind that you think you are holding it in your hands?" Speaking of this, he turned around and looked directly at the student. His gaze was not stern, but transparent, to the point that it was impossible to dodge. Most people understand the mind by concepts, by the words they hear, not by real-life experience. So they think that keeping the mind is something floating in the clouds, so they're very easy to get lost. The two teachers and students walked away again. The path leads through a wide field where the golden grass trembles in the afternoon breeze. He continued, his voice slow, as if telling an old story. "If you don't know that a tree starts with a root, you will think that the flower is the whole tree. If you don't know how the mind relies on the body, you will think vague thoughts are the nature of the mind. That's why we need to be self-centered. The stem is the root, the mind is the treasure, the leaf, and wisdom is a flower. Without seeing the roots, how do you know the tree? If you don't return to the body, how can you touch the heart?" When the student heard this, he suddenly felt something moved in his heart, but it was still not enough to fully understand. He raised his voice. "But teacher, this body eventually dissolved. It is not the truth. Why did I start from something unreal?" He laughed, a laugh so faint that it sounded like the wind passing through the trees. "You say it's not true, but right now, if someone poked you with a sharp thorn, would it really hurt you?" He blushed slightly. "Yes, yes. So the body is not real, but it really hurts?" The teacher asked. "It's not that it's unreal. What you are talking about is the impermanent body. The body is impermanent, but its experience is always true. Everything passes through the body. The breath passes through the body. The footsteps pass through the body. The feeling of joy and sorrow passes through the body. And even the idea of liberation or confusion arises from these movements in the body. So if you leave your body out, where will you go to find a foundation to cultivate? The students were silent for a long time. It seemed that something was slowly opening up in his answer. But another question arises. He said, "Teacher, what is the purpose of contemplating the body? I see how many troublesome things my body has: pain, fatigue, hunger, illness. The body is a miserable child. Why did you force me to go back to it? Isn't Zen to overcome suffering?" He stopped. This time he turned around and stood opposite the student. The afternoon light had thinned, and there was a gentle look on his face, but also full of understanding. "I say that my body makes me miserable, but the body never does anything on its own. The body only reflects the facts that are happening. Hungry body, that's the announcement. Body pain, that's the signal. Tired body, that's a reminder. But my mind hates those announcements, so I am miserable. It is not the body that causes suffering. It is the denial of the truth that causes suffering." He raised a hand, pointing to his own chest. When you contemplate yourself, you learn to face the truth that is happening right now. Do not run away. No opposition. When the intellect looks straight, suffering dissolves. The two teachers and students continued walking, and the sky had now turned dark purple. They crossed a small wooden bridge across a clear stream, the water flowing like a soft chant. He spoke quietly, almost just enough for someone who was really listening. People suffer because they are not where they are. The body is here. The mind runs away. The body is breathing, and the mind thinks of yesterday's regrets or tomorrow's fears. I can't find peace if I don't return to where I am. A wind blows up from the valley, bringing with it the smell of rotten leaves and the chill of the coming night. The student shrank his shoulders slightly. He saw it, but he only said, "Do you see the cold wind?" He nodded. "My body feels it before my mind thinks about it. Truth comes from direct feeling. It doesn't come from inference. So meditation begins with the body. Feel the breath, feel the footsteps, feel every subtle movement. When the body is fully felt, the mind naturally calms down." Gradually, the first lights of fire in the houses under the valley appeared. His hut has also appeared behind the bamboo grove. The student breathed lightly, as if he was able to vent some of the heavy things in his heart. But before entering the tent, he suddenly asked, "Do you know why the Buddha taught contemplating the body in the body?" He shook his head. He said, "Because if you don't see the body as it is, you will mix in it your thoughts, concepts, memories, fears, desires. I can't see the body. I only see my idea of the body. The truth is very simple. Only I am complicated," he continued in a low but low voice. "And when you come into contact with the body as it is, you will begin to see the mind. Then the mind also appears as it is, not stained by delusions, not covered by habit. Don't be bent by what you think you know." In that moment, the student looks at the teacher and feels like there is a small, very small, slightly open door in his heart. He said, "I understand a little, but there's still a lot of ambiguity." He laughed. "Ambiguity is true. Wisdom is not something that can be understood by thinking alone. It's like if you want to know the taste of water, you have to drink it. If you want to know the smell of the wind, you have to stand in the wind. If you want to know your mind, you have to return to your own body and mind." He opened the door of the hut and went inside. But before he disappeared behind the bamboo curtains, he said one more sentence, as light as the wind, but as clear as the sound of a stream. "Go. Take a real step with your body, and the mind will follow." The student stood in front of the door of the tent, silent. On the road that had just passed, the afternoon mist was falling, covering the shadows of the two teachers and students like a thin cloth. He closed his eyes, and for the first time, he felt his breath, not through his thoughts, but through his own body that was gently swollen and deflated. He took a small step, midget, but it's a real first step. The night has completely fallen. But in the heart of the student, there is a quiet light that has just arisen. A light that only appears when one actually returns to where one is standing, right here, in this body, in this life. On our journey into the stillness of the mind, there are times when we suddenly find the greatest wisdom in a seemingly small thing. A smile, a moment of gentle interruption, or even a laugh that bursts out of nowhere. The story we're about to enter is a testament to this. A lesson in the wisdom that comes from laughter, and about the suffering people inflict on themselves when they're to themselves. This is the story of a young monk who has been searching for morality for years, but finally discovers that his real teacher is not the scriptures, not the reasoning, but the sudden laughter of the master, a simple sound that is more enlightening than any teaching. On that day, in a monastery tucked away among the ancient mountains of China, where the mist covered the tile roof and the wind of thousands of pines resounded in wordless verses, there was a young monk known for his almost absolute seriousness. Since he was a young man, he approached his practice with such intense devotion that his fellow practitioners were sometimes both admiring and amazing. Every morning before the sun awoke, when the sky was still dark blue and the ground was still soaked with the humidity of the night, the young monk sat quietly on the platform in the silent meditation hall, motionless like a statue. He meditated for hours, his back straight as a bow, his breathing so light that it was difficult for anyone to notice. When the bell for the end of the meditation session sounded, many people breathed a sigh of relief, but he sat for a moment longer, as if trying to hold on to the last breath of silence. Not only meditating, he also immersed himself in the scriptures with the precision of a dedicated scholar. The ancient scriptures with faded Chinese characters were transcribed by him, every stroke, as if he was carving into his own heart. When debating doctrine, he always used sharp logic, made clear evidence, and did not overlook any ambiguity. Older monks sometimes smile. He's as serious as a rock. Fellow practitioners whispered, he never smiles. But for the young monk, that seriousness was a source of pride, proof that he was indeed on the true path to enlightenment. Then one autumn morning, when the red maple leaves began to fall like gentle flames to the ground, the young monk opened a passage that he had long wanted to study. It is a passage that discusses emptiness, a topic that, even though it has been studied many times, always makes the reader wary because of its profound depth. But that day, when he read it again, he suddenly stopped halfway. The words in front of him seemed to have a very clear meaning, but as long as they were connected, all the logic he thought he had a firm grasp instantly dissolved into a paradox. It's like holding a handful of snow in your hand. The more you try to hold on, the faster it melts. He read it again a second, a third time, and then a 10th time, but he still couldn't understand what the text was saying. It confused him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time. Determined to find the answer, he marked the sutra with a golden silk ribbon and walked back to the teacher's room. The simple room was located in the quietest corner of the monastery. The walls are made of wood, and the paper windows let in the pale yellow light through them, forming soft shapes on the floor. When he walked in, he was sitting cross-legged, his eyes half closed, his breath gentle, as if blending in with the sound of the wind outside. The young monk bowed his head deeply. Master Bai, I have encountered a teaching that I can't understand. Please teach me. He read the passage in a careful voice, then presented each interpretation he had considered, analyzing each layer of meaning and paradox. He listened, was silent, sometimes just nodded slightly. His eyes were as deep and gentle as the surface of an autumn lake. But when the young monk had just finished speaking, what happened then was completely beyond his expectations. In front of him, his face suddenly expanded into a smile so wide that the wrinkles at the corners of his eyes blended into the light. And then, as if a stream had suddenly burst, he burst out laughing. First a slight giggle, then a hearty laugh, which echoed throughout the little room. He laughed so much that his shoulders shook and tears rolled down his cheeks. There was no explanation, not a lecture, only pure and complete laughter. The young monk stood dumbfounded. He is laughing? Laughing at the moment? Laughing at the question that he had worked so hard to prepare and was full of reverence? If a sudden bell could shake the whole meditation hall, the teacher's laughter at that time shook him to the bottom of his heart. When the laughter subsided, he stood up, still wiping away his tears, still smiling, and walked out of the room, as gentle as a breeze, leaving the young monk standing in the middle of the vast room of confusion. The first day passed. The monk didn't eat much. He reminded himself that his laughter must have some meaning, but the more he thought about it, the more he felt like he was covered by a dark cloud. At night, he tried to meditate, but his mind was like a wild horse, running wild in unanswered questions. The second day came. Fellow practitioners came to inquire, but he only responded with hesitant words. He felt shame, a feeling he had long thought he had overcome. In his head, cold questions rang out. Are you mocking me? How wrong have I been? Years of elaborate self-study. Is it just stupidity that I don't realize? Each question swirled deep into him, like a drop of water falling on a worn rock. On the third day, he hardly slept. The torment reached its peak. Unable to bear it anymore, he walked to the teacher's room, his heart full of anxiety, but also full of urgency. Without formality, without his usual serious appearance, he exclaimed in a trembling but sincere voice, "Teacher, please tell me. For the past 3 days, my heart has not been at peace. I can't eat, I can't sleep, I can't meditate. Why are you laughing? What did you do wrong?" He laughed. "Is it because you want to make fun of me?" At that time, he looked at him with eyes so gentle that he could make a flower bloom on its own. He motioned for him to sit down next to him. Then, in a voice as soft as the wind, "Do you know what your problem is? Child, worse than a clown." Like a blow to the chest, the young monk opened his eyes wide, stunned. "Teacher, how can you say that? I have devoted my life to the Tao. I renounced the world. I studied the sutras. I meditated day and night. How can you say you're worse than a clown?" He smiled kindly. "A clown's son is happiest when it comes to making others laugh. The laughter of others is its joy. But when I heard him laugh, I was miserable again. When others laugh, I feel offended. Tell me, isn't that worse than a clown?" Like the dawn tearing through the thickest fog, the truth unfolds. The young monk understood that he had become too attached to his own image, the image of a serious intellectual cultivator who deserved respect. It was that me that made him unable to accept his teacher's carefree laughter. That laughter did not carry any ridicule. It is the joy of seeing the Dharma nature manifest in paradoxes, in the indescribable in words. The young monk bowed. Already, he laughed. At first it was a whisper, then it grew louder, then it was free, and then it filled the whole body. He laughed at himself, laughed at the excessive seriousness, laughed at the clinging to knowledge. His laughter, mingled with the laughter of the teacher 3 days ago, became a bridge between two souls. And in that moment, he gained a lesson that he had not touched for years. His laughter and his own laughter opened a door, the door of letting go, of understanding that wisdom is not always in analysis, in reasoning, in perfection of form. There are times when wisdom comes like light bursting from an unintentional smile. From that story, we understand that we often suffer not because of circumstances, but because of our own expectations of circumstances. When others don't react the way we want them to, when they're not as serious as we would like, when they're happy when we need weight, we're miserable. But that suffering, in essence, is just a mirror of the self that is asking for recognition. And then we ask, are we seeking the truth, or are we looking for confirmation? Are we open to wisdom in all its forms, or are we demanding that the world conform to our own concepts? The teacher's laughter is the answer. France is playful, vast, natural, beyond stereotypes. Happiness does not diminish when shared. Joy does not diminish the depth of the religion. And the one who truly understands the Tao is the one who can laugh when the world is not as expected. And who knows, even in those moments when someone laughs when we expect them to be serious, or when life throws us something different from what we want, wisdom is quietly blossoming, just waiting for us to open our hearts to realize. In the gentle afternoon along the ancient Silk Road, where caravans tail to tail through misty valleys and endless sprawling fields, there is a small but bustling market like a heartbeat beating in the middle of a desert of eternal movement. Silk merchants, buskers tell old tales, children run around, and nomads carry flavors of distant lands on the horizon. In that noise and bustle, like a quiet spot in the endless vortex of life, there is a small tea bar consisting of only a bamboo roof and an old wooden table that is worn out with time. It is the place where a wise Zen master has chosen to dwell, not to trade, but to listen to and enlighten souls struggling in the midst of the constant shifts of life. People come here for tea, but the real reason for bringing them here is his presence. A presence that makes one feel like the wind stopping a beat, like the mind clearing a fog. On that day, when the sun was still hovering in the sky, two travelers, who did not know each other, who were traveling from different directions, came to the tea house with the same question. They're both considering moving to this town, which they believe could be the starting point for a new chapter in their lives. But even though the question is the same, they carry diametrically opposite inner worlds. The first person walked forward with a heavy appearance. From his scowling face to his slender shoulders, his whole person exudes a tense and barren energy, as if he has traveled through many lands, but everywhere he leaves, traces of disappointment. His gaze swept around the market not to admire, but to find faults, not to receive, but to judge. When standing in front of the Zen master, he hardly bothered to say hello. His voice dropped like a verdict. "I'm thinking of moving to this town. What is it like?" The Zen master looked at him. His eyes were gentle as if he had seen through the question, through the emotional dust that was clouding in the traveler's heart. He didn't answer right away, but asked a simple but deeper question than any advice. "What about your old neighborhood?" The man breathed heavily, as if he was just waiting for something to vent the pent-up inside. He spoke of the old place in a voice filled with bitterness. Indifferent neighbors, rude people, selfish merchants, heavy air and coldness that covered each street. He concluded with a sigh. "I've endured enough. I have to leave that place." The Zen master listened to every word, every fluctuation in the guest's voice. Then he nodded, slowly and compassionately, as if he understood him better than the man himself. "This town," he said softly but surely, "is very much like that. I don't think you should move here." The man's expression tightened, as if he had been denied something he didn't know he was looking for. Without saying another word, he turned his back and walked away, frustratingly closing a door that he had actually closed from the inside for a long time. A few moments later, when everything had just returned to its peaceful state, the second traveler appeared. He walked in with the exact opposite appearance, relieved, open, and carrying a pervasive gentleness. His eyes looked around the market with the innocent enjoyment of a man exploring the world rather than examining it. When smiling at a Zen master, that smile comes from a sincerity that does not need to be hidden. "I'm thinking about moving to this town," he said. "What is it like?" The Zen master asked the same question. "What about your old town?" The second man smiled even brighter. "He talks about where he left with a twinkle in his eye. Friendly neighbors, people supporting each other, shopkeepers remembering customers' names, a warm connection like a blanket woven with everyday stories. He only came here because he wanted to open up new opportunities, to experience the adventures that his heart had been urging for a long time. When he finished listening, the Zen master nodded, his smile as light as a budding flower. "This town," he said, "is the same. I think you'll like it here." The man thanked him, his eyes shining with hope and eagerness, and then left with a vibrant step, as if the sky of the new town had opened to welcome him at once. When the guest was deceased, the Zen master was still sitting there, his hand holding the teacup still a little warm. He watched the clouds pass by, the sun shining on the tea water like the light of wisdom reflected from within each person. The question is the same. The answer is the same, but the result is completely different. And that difference is not in the town, but in the two travelers themselves. This is exactly what the Buddha taught thousands of years ago. The mind leads things. The mind is the master. The mind is artificial. People do not see the world as it is, but see it through a glass stained by the beliefs, fears, memories, and habits that accumulate in their minds. The first man lived in a mental habit that modern psychology might call a negative bias. He carries a pessimistic frosted glass. He sees only faults in others, remembers only unpleasant things, only stores energy for disappointment. And when that's what his mind is constantly creating, he carries it with him wherever he goes. If he moves to a new town, reality will continue to repeat the pattern he expects, because his mind only knows how to look for the lacking. The latter, on the other hand, carries with them gratitude and a natural belief in kindness. His glasses are clear and bright, so the light of life is easy to shine through. Wherever he went, he found connection, warmth, and potential. His old town is certainly not perfect, but his mind finds and nurtures the best part of it. So wherever he went, the world reflected his energy. And so the Zen master's answer was not to judge the town, but to illuminate the mirror that each one had carried. He only responded to their inner world, because he knew that if the inner weather was not changed, the rainy season would follow the first man wherever he went, and the spring would follow the second. This story reminds us of a simple but profound truth. What we look for in the outer world is often just a reflection of the inner world. Whoever carries fire in his heart will find warmth everywhere. Anyone who carries ice in their hearts will feel the cold wind, even if they stand in the middle of summer. And each of us, in every moment, has the right to plant the seeds for the kind of world we want to experience. There is no need to travel far to build another life. Sometimes, just by changing the lens we look at, the whole sky is different. The Zen master followed the footsteps of the two travelers. His heart was as calm as the surface of a windless lake. He knew that their journey from now on would go in two completely different directions, though they might be on the same path. A person will continue to look for faults and disappointments. The other person will recognize the little miracles in the most ordinary things, and it is also a journey that any of us must choose for ourselves. Tonight, as you look back at your own experiences, at home, at work, in the community, or in relationships, do you recognize the lens you're wearing? Are you like the first traveler, always having a list of things that aren't right to confirm that the world isn't good enough? Or are you like the second person, finding opportunities to connect, to be grateful, to open up to life? Because in the end, as the Buddha said, the mind is the most powerful tool in creating experience. It is not the situation, not the environment, not the other person. It is our mind that determines the world we see. And when we change our minds, the natural world changes as well. In the tranquil garden of an ancient temple nestled in the middle of the serene mountains, the sound of leaves rustling softly in the morning breeze and the gentle sunlight creeping through the canopy like soft golden silk strips. It is a place where students often come to listen to the teachings of the old Zen master, who has spent his life contemplating the nature of the mind and to illuminate the path for those who are willing to learn. Among those who came to him, There was a young man who was intelligent, quick-witted, and full of questions. This student, though he respected his teacher, became increasingly annoyed by the fact that any of his questions, no matter how difficult or sharp, seemed to be answered by the teacher with a calmness and simple sentences that, according to him, were only riddles full of hidden meanings. He believed that he was only showing wisdom and not really understanding, that calmness was just a fog that hid his helplessness. And the more he thought about it, the more he wanted to prove that the old teacher had been inflated by the world. In his heart, there was a desire to challenge, a need to expose what he believed to be a profound pretense. After many days of worrying, he finally came up with a plan that, according to him, was perfect and unbreakable. One early morning, when the dew was still on the grass and the birds were chirping to the sun, the boy sneaked out into the back garden where the low trees cast shade. Here he saw a small sparrow dancing on the branches, his eyes round full of curiosity. With his nimble hands, the boy gently grabbed it. The bird was suddenly imprisoned in his clenched hands, trembling endlessly, and the tiny breath hit his palm like a fearful hiccup. He felt its rapid heartbeat, but without the slightest hesitation. In his mind, this plan would be proof that his teacher was just an old man full of philosophical rhetoric, but empty. Hiding the bird behind his back, the boy walked towards the temple courtyard, where the teacher was sitting under a large Bodhi tree. He was reading an ancient sutra, his face as calm as the surface of a lake without ripples. The sunlight shone on the aging face, highlighting wrinkles like inscriptions engraved with time. When he heard the sound of footsteps, he gently looked up, his gentle eyes looking at the young student. Those eyes make anyone feel like they are being fully seen through and still fully accepted. "Master," the boy said, his voice unable to hide his excitement and a hint of defiance. "I have a question today, a question that will test your famous wisdom." The old master put down the sutra. His eyes did not waver. Over the years as a teacher, he has met countless such students, young people who want to assert themselves, want to challenge, want to surpass. He understands that it is not disrespectful, but a necessary step in each person's journey of growth. "Okay," he smiled softly. "Tell me your question." The boy straightened his back, raising his shoulders as if about to deliver a fatal blow. Behind him, the little bird was still trembling in his hands, the delicate warmth hitting his skin. "Master," he said, trying to keep his voice calm, "I'm holding a small bird in my hand right now. Please use your wisdom to tell me, is this bird alive or dead?" As he said that, a satisfied smile appeared on his lips. In his mind, the plan was very clear. If he said the bird was alive, just squeeze it lightly, and he would let him see a dead creature, proving him wrong. If you say it's dead, you just have to open your hand to let the bird fly away, and continue to prove you wrong. No matter how he answered, he was the winner. This question, according to him, cannot be answered correctly. He did not answer immediately. He looked at him for a long time, his gaze neither swirling deep nor judging, just as if he was looking through his stubborn shell to reach something deeper. The wind blew gently, shaking the foliage. The morning light embraced the scenery, making everything seem to be immersed in infinite peace. In that silence, the teacher slowly opened his mouth, his voice as soft as a breath of wind, but it resounded clearly in the boy's mind. "Do you want to know if the bird is alive or dead?" He smiled, and his smile contained both understanding and compassion. "The answer," he said, "is in your own hands." Those three simple words, "in your hands," shatter the entire trap that the boy had worked so hard to build. He stood still as if petrified, his mouth slightly open. His elaborate planning, his eagerness to wait for victory, his confidence to defeat him, all were dispelled by the very words. He suddenly felt that his hands were heavier than before, as if they contained not only a small creature, but also a great truth that he had never thought of. The bird under his hand was still trembling, as if to remind him that this life was completely dependent on his own choices. He couldn't blame him. He couldn't use his wisdom to decide this. You're the one who decides everything. Silence engulfed the temple grounds. A golden leaf fell beside his feet, spinning slowly, as if time was lingering to wait for his choice. The boy slowly raised his hand in front of him. The hands opened gently. The little bird initially cringed, then slowly raised its head. His eyes looked at the vast sky, as if suppressing his fear. Then, with a strong jerk of its little wings, it soared. The flapping of its wings blends into the air, dissolves into the sky, and disappears among the green foliage. The boy watched it for a long time. In that moment, he realized something that no win or loss could bring. The fate of the bird had never depended on his answers, only on himself. Life or death, compassion or cruelty, understanding or melancholy, all of them were in the choice he made. And the truth is that life is no different from that moment. Every decision, no matter how small or large, puts in our hands a power that we sometimes don't realize. He looked at him, his gentle eyes as if embracing the whole sky. You see, he said softly, in life there are questions to which the answer never lies on the outside. Others cannot make decisions for you, nor can you take responsibility for them. Your choice and its consequences is always in your hands. Those words, instead of making the boy protest, crept into the depths of his heart. He realized that he was always looking for ways to challenge, always trying to prove others wrong, just because he wanted to avoid responsibility for his own choices. He wanted the teacher to answer, so that there was someone to blame, to oppose, to prove that he was smarter. But in reality, what he was looking for was not victory, but validation from the outside. Zen Buddhism teaches that wisdom cannot be transmitted verbally. A teacher cannot insert understanding into the student's head. The only thing you can do is show your students where they have forgotten to look, within themselves. And in the moment the bird flew away, the boy felt it with all his heart. He bowed his head, not because I lost, but because I finally understood. In this world, we often carry such little birds, unmade choices, responsibilities we evade, decisions we push for circumstances or others. We say, I can't, I don't have a choice, this is out of my hands. But the truth is that in almost every moment of our lives, we hold some form of power in our hands. The right to react, the right to change, the right to choose direction, the right to choose good instead of destroy. And I just gently reminded him that power is always there, only that we often forget that we have it. As the Buddha taught, the mind is everything. With the mind, we create the world. No one can make decisions for me, nor can anyone save me but myself. It all starts with a choice, even if it's as small as opening the palm of your hand to release a young bird. And when the young man walked back to his room in that quiet morning, he felt as if the world had suddenly become larger. Not because the scenery changed, but because there was a gentle but profound movement inside him. He understood that from that day on, whenever faced with a difficult situation, a vague choice, a moment of uncertainty, he would remember that the answer lay not in anyone else, but in his own hands. And in that consciousness, the path ahead of him began to light up, not thanks to the light from the outside, but because of the lamp that had just been lit from the inside. As we continue our journey through the quiet wisdom of Zen Buddhism, let's enter together into a story of true spiritual power. The power that comes not from supernatural miracles, but from awakening to the simple life itself. It is the story of the miracle of ordinary life, and the story begins at the Ryuman Temple, in the sunset as soft as silk spreading to the ground. Inside the hall, Zen Master Bankai was teaching the Dharma to a large group of attentive disciples. The whole hall sat silently, like a flat lake that reflected every word he preached about living with natural awareness. A simple cognition that contains the sky of wisdom. The warm, dim light of the afternoon penetrated through the wooden door frames, shining pale yellow strips on the floor, making the whole space imbued with peace and contemplation. But in the midst of that very moment of silence, a commotion suddenly emerged from the back of the hall, shattering the tranquility like a pebble thrown into the water. A Shinshu priest, who has his own temple nearby, jostles through the crowd with a face flushed with jealousy and unconcealed agitation. He has lost many followers since Bankai's reputation grew. The rivalry that simmered in his heart rolled up into a great wave, and it pushed him into the middle of the hall, despite the silence that enveloped the place. Bankai stopped preaching, turning his gaze towards the chaotic sound. His gaze was not a little uncomfortable, but only gentle curiosity. "What noise is interrupting our evening?" he asked, his voice as calm as the night breeze. The priest stood up. His voice rang out, drowning out the whispers of the congregation. "The founder of our sect," he said arrogantly, "had such miraculous power that he stood by the riverbank, holding a palm in his hand. His servant held up a piece of paper from the other side, and my teacher wrote the holy name Amitabh on it, in midair. Can you do that?" The whole hall turned its eyes to Bankai. Some disciples held their breath, waiting to see if their teacher would perform a miracle comparable to that. Others are curious whether Bankai will choose to debate or let things pass like an afternoon cloud. But Bankai only smiled slightly. That smile was as light as a ripple, carrying the gentle enjoyment of a person who understood the heart of the person standing in front of him. "Perhaps," he said as softly as his breath, "your fox can do the trick. But that's not the path of Zen. My miracle," he continued, "is that when I am hungry, I eat. When I'm thirsty, I drink." The whole hall fell silent. A silence is not of emptiness, but of understanding that is gradually spreading in each heart, like the moon slowly revealing itself in the sky. The priest who came to witness the supernatural power was unable to say a word, because he realized that he was facing not a weak man who avoided him, but with an intellect that pointed out a miracle beyond the extraordinary things he was pursuing. The Buddha once said, "If you want to know your past, look at your present state. If you want to know your future, look at your current actions." That old teaching seems to be revived in this moment, clarifying the truth that true spiritual power does not lie in miraculous performances, but in being fully present with each ordinary thing that is happening. Why do people keep looking for miracles outside of life? Meditation shows that our minds are attracted to drama, by the sense that enlightenment must be something splendid, supernatural, separate from everyday life. But reality is the exact opposite. Enlightenment is the ability to remain fully present in each moment to whatever is arising. Consciousness itself, being able to hear a sound, feel a taste, or see light, is the most miraculous thing. But people often forget these small miracles while running for great spiritual manifestations. Look at your own breath right now. Do you need to try to let it happen? Your heart beats steadily without anyone giving orders. The light enters your eyes, becomes the image, becomes the text you are reading. All are the miracles of life. Zen master Suzuki Roshi once said, "Each one of you is perfect in your own way, and you can still use a little improvement." This seemingly paradoxical statement actually indicates that no one has to become a special person to access the truth. All you need is to live fully with yourself. The Buddha also taught, there are two biggest mistakes on the path to the truth, not starting and not going all the way. And Bankai, through his slight smile, shows that the path begins right here, in the very meals, the breath, the glass of water that we drink every day. When you pick up a glass of water tonight, try stopping for a beat. Feel the magic of water flowing into your body. Try to recognize the miracle of life that is silently sustaining you. The miracles that people seek in heaven are actually in this body, in this life, in every simple movement that we usually take for granted. And after the story of the miracle of the normal, we enter another story, the story of the origin of freedom. In the peaceful monastery garden, the cherry blossoms falling like pink snowflakes, a young student approached his teacher in the afternoon meditation. The teacher was sitting under an old maple tree where the sunset was gently touching each leaf, leaving soft purple and yellow streaks in the sky. The student had been practicing seriously for many years, but recently deep questions had arisen in his mind that he had never dared to say. Finally, under the fading sunset, he mustered up the courage to speak. "Teacher," he said in a low voice, "when I was young, I always wanted my family to be proud of me. They want to study well, do things that make them radiant. Have you ever been like that?" The teacher opened his eyes and looked at the student with eyes that contained both understanding and love. "I'm very much like you," he said. The student felt like the burden of years of insecurity suddenly eased a little. "What is it," he asked, "that makes you crave that pride so intensely?" The teacher smiled, a gentle smile of old memory. "I think," he said slowly, "I hope they are proud. Because we want them to have more reasons to love us. We think that if we are good enough and accomplished enough, then their love will be more certain and fuller. But deeper than that." He paused, watching the cherry blossoms fall into his palms. "Deeper, I seek their love because I don't know how to love myself. We need their recognition to feel that we are worthy. I need other people's eyes to confirm my own worth." The student felt his heart tighten, as if he had heard something he had always known, but had never dared to look at directly. "And how did you get through that?" he asked. The teacher looked up at the sky that had turned the deep blue of the early night. "One day," he says, "I wake up and suddenly realize that I can ask myself a completely different question. That question changed my whole life." He placed his hands on his chest. "I ask, what if I could love myself without waiting for anyone's permission? What if our value is not based on who praises or criticizes? If the peace of my heart does not change no matter how the world turns?" The boy was silent. His words were like a wind that opened the door in his heart. "That," the teacher said, "is when the real spiritual journey begins, when you turn around and learn to accept yourself unconditionally. Not to be anyone else, but to be yourself, completely and freely." The story ends, but the echo still lingers like a bell ringing in the night. The miracle is not far away. It lies in the breath, in the glass of water, in the truest acknowledgement of each human being that he or she is enough. And freedom, in the end, does not come from how others see us, but from seeing ourselves, not by wandering in search of something outside, but by returning to discover what was already complete inside, and thus began my journey. The teacher told his story in a deep voice, as if every word he said was cherished by the silence that had been tempered through years of meditation. After a long silence, the student sitting opposite him couldn't help but ask, "So, Master, do you no longer crave the pride that the world gives? Does that longing disappear completely?" The monk laughed slightly, his smile as light as the sound of leaves touching the wind. "Oh," he said, "my ego is still there, and it certainly still wants to be approved. Patterns formed over the months of May cannot evaporate overnight. But one important thing has changed, our relationship with those desires." He gently pointed to the quiet garden behind the meditation. It was already dark, and the fireflies began to twinkle like winged thoughts. "I've learned to look at recognition-seeking thoughts like fireflies. They appear, sparkle a little, and then dissolve into the darkness. We observe them with care and compassion, but no longer give them the power to define our values." The student asked again, "Does that mean you still care about what others think of you?" The teacher nodded. "I respect their opinions, and I also respect their perspectives, but I don't let them be a weight in my heart anymore." Approval of others. It's just like the weather now. Sometimes it's gentle, sometimes it's uncomfortable, but I can't decide whether I'm at peace with myself or not. The teacher's face lit up with a calm joy, like the joy of someone who had just thrown a burden on his shoulders that he did not know how long he had been carrying. I've never felt as free as I did when I finally liberated myself in that way. It's as if we've been wearing invisible chains for decades, and then suddenly one day they fall down on their own without us having to force them. The love we have sought from others, it turns out that I'm still right here, in myself. I've never left. The teacher was silent for a moment, as if to let the words spread themselves through the air. The Buddha taught, if you really love yourself, you will never hurt yourself with negative thoughts, actions, or choices. And that's the heart of what we discover. Most human suffering is born from the mistaken belief that we must deserve love by achievement, good behavior, or approval from someone. But loving yourself, loving really, unconditionally, is never a reward to be earned. It's an innate right. He looked up at the night sky, where the stars had just risen, discreetly but surely. We are born complete, deserving, simply because we exist. But why is it so hard to love yourself? Because from the first years of life, we learn that love must be achieved by obedience, by achievement, by pleasing others. We learn to treat ourselves the same way those around us used to treat us. Sometimes affectionately, but sometimes judgmentally, conditional love. Gradually, unconditional self-acceptance becomes as alien as a dusty domain of memory. He says that the culture we live in doesn't help either. Every message, every slogan outside society emphasizes an illusion. That happiness lies somewhere outside, in what we can achieve or hold. Each such reminder pushes us away from ourselves, making us believe that we are not enough, that we need to do more, become more, to deserve to feel safe. Have you noticed, the teacher asked, how much mental energy have we put into managing other people's opinions? How many times have you corrected yourself, said differently, did things differently, just to be approved? How many times do you judge your self-worth based on external feedback, rather than an internal realization that you are inherently complete? His voice was soft but permeable, like the sound of water flowing through a rock. When you learn to love yourself unconditionally, you have such a solid foundation that even when others praise you, you accept it with gratitude instead of hunger. And when they criticize, I stand my ground too, because my core values don't waver. He recounted the Buddha's familiar teaching. You can search the whole universe, but you will find no one more worthy of your love and care than yourself. And he is always here. The teacher emphasizes that this is not narcissism, much less blind self-esteem. It is an acknowledgement of the truth of consciousness itself, that the deepest part of us is always clear, and always worthy of love. He asked quietly, do you feel the presence of reading these words now? What is the knowledge that is listening, that is witnessing, that is not increased or diminished by anything that happens? It's still like space, open, clear, untinged by fleeting clouds. Then he smiled, as if he himself were gently embracing that presence within him. What if you treated that presence with all the tenderness it deserves? What if you give yourself the patience you give to a child who is learning? If you give yourself the compassion you have for a friend who is lost? He reiterated the Buddha's teaching. Hatred can never be appeased by hatred. Only love can do it. And he added, self-blame is never healed by more blame. It is only by loving yourself, not who you think you need to be, but who you are here, that you create the conditions for true transformation. The student sat still and did not speak, but his eyes had softened, like the surface of the lake being flattened by the afternoon wind. The teacher looks at his students with all the compassion that an open heart can give. As you discover this unconditional love within, he said, you will realize that the freedom you once craved, the relief you once sought in the eyes of others, has never come from the outside. Everything I was looking for has been present for a long time. silently and persistently, like the beating of my own heart. Then he closed his eyes, and so did the student. The night wind caressed through the trees, and the fireflies still danced like thoughts sparkling in the dark night, appearing and dissipating. And in the midst of that space, without a word, they feel a simple but profound truth, that when we return to our pristine love for ourselves, all our searches become quiet. Freedom also begins here, from the peaceful beat in the chest, from the gentle light of awareness, and from the unconditional embrace of who one has always been. In the Zen Buddhist tradition, there are stories that are not meant to be taught verbally, but with a direct touch to the core of cognition. The story of Abbot Chao Cho and his young disciple is one such teaching, one that reveals the profound difference between being spiritually aware and actually living in awakening. Before we understand the story, we need to enter its setting, an ancient monastery deep in the mountains, where the sunrise every day falls on the moss-covered stone terraces as a sacred ritual bestowed by heaven and earth. Chao Monastery is a vast place where hundreds of monks live, meditate, and work together. Every morning, before the sun rises over the mountaintops, a loud bell rings from the main meditation hall, sounding like the first breath of a new day. After a quiet meditation, a silence so deep that one can clearly hear the wind blowing through the crevices or the sound of insects moving softly, the monks scattered throughout the grounds to carry out their daily tasks. Some people take care of the garden, some go into the kitchen, some bring books to copy, some check the perennial wooden corridors for repairs. No job is considered inferior. In the monastery, all action is meditation if done with an awake mind. The abbot, Cao Cho, used to spend his mornings walking slowly around the monastery, observing his students, listening to the monastery's breath as if he were listening to his own heartbeat. He is famous not for his seriousness, but for his gentle and deep insight. Those who have come into contact with him understand that his seemingly ordinary words can bring an unexpected awakening. A simple question of his can become a great lesson, and a sublime doctrine sometimes turns into a challenge that confuses the listener. That morning, as he passed behind the main meditation hall, a dark wooden building where the whole community gathered twice a day to meditate, he saw a young monk sitting quietly in the shade of the porch. The monk seems to be practicing something alone, not according to the community's schedule. This was not uncommon in the monastery, but the teacher's gaze stopped on this disciple for a little longer. He approached, each of his steps so light that there was no distinct sound. "Son," he said, still as gentle as an intimate inquiry, "where have the virtuous people gone?" The question sounds like a mere comment, but in the abbot's style, it can be anything: a challenge, a reminder, or a door that opens to something bigger. The young monk looked up, his eyes shining with confidence. He has lived in the monastery for several years and considers himself a good grasp of Zen teachings. This is an opportunity to show your understanding. He pointed to areas of the monastery where other monks were working. "They've all gone to work," he replied firmly. For him, the answer was obvious. Moral people, in his understanding, were people who were working hard, not sitting alone. However, as soon as the words ended, what happened next made the foundation of his understanding shatter in an instant. Without warning, the abbot reached into his sleeve and pulled out a sharp knife with a metal blade that reflected the morning sun. But what was scary was not the knife, it was his actions. With absolute composure, he stretched out his neck, completely exposed his throat to the blade, and handed the knife to the young disciple. His voice was still soft, still as if he was suggesting something very ordinary. "The responsibility of being an abbot is heavy and exhausting," he said. "Can you behead me for me? That will probably lighten my burden." It shattered all the notions on which the disciple had relied. His hand holding the knife began to tremble violently. His eyes widened, shocked as if the world had just turned unimaginable. He couldn't understand what was going on. According to all common sense, this is completely wrong, immoral, contrary to all teachings, all monastic rules, all basic morality. He did not know where to look, at the knife in his hand, at the bare neck of the venerable teacher, or at the casual countenance of the man who was asking, "Behead." He panicked, dropped the knife on the ground, and ran away as if chased by a ghost. The abbot simply bent down to pick up the knife, gently put it back in his robe, and continued his morning walk as if nothing had happened. There was not a hint of anger, not a hint of disappointment. There is only the strange peace of the one who knows what he is doing. This story is not to shock, but to expose a truth. Intellectual understanding is far from true insight. The young monk knew the right answer, but he didn't see the real meaning behind the question. He thinks in concept, not in perception. He thought that practicing meditation and working were two opposites. He thinks that morality lies in action, but forgets that wisdom lies in the mind that sees through action. Cao Cho's teachings do not lie in demanding beheading. It lies in breaking down a rigid concept in the minds of students. If all moral people are already working, what is the most important? If the responsibility is heavy, what are you willing to do to help me? In the face of real suffering, what does compassion entail? Is there ever a time when cutting off the most precious thing, not someone's head, but the conceptual head we're clinging to, is the true act of compassion? In Zen, it is often said, if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill the Buddha. It is not to kill the Buddha with flesh and blood, but to kill the image of the Buddha that is preventing us from seeing the truth. Similarly, Cao Cho is asking his disciple to do what the conventional mind thinks is crazy, to bring him to the boundary where the concept of collapse and intuition emerges. The young monk, bound by the concept, saw only the surface action and fled. He could not see that the teacher was inviting him to walk through an open door that he himself had refused. The story forces us to look back at ourselves. I believe that anyone who has ever practiced spirituality has at some point wondered, are we really living with awareness? Or are we just gathering knowledge, teachings, concepts, and things that sound right? When someone comes to us in their pain, do we respond by rote or with true understanding? Have we ever been just repeating moral things and forgotten that true compassion is sometimes beyond all familiar frameworks? Meditation does not accept the safety of the concept. It's constantly breaking what we thought we knew. It requires us to be ready to let all certainties be knocked out. Only when we let go of our accustomed head can we see with our own clear intuition. The story ends not in the actions of the young monk, but in the absolute equanimity of the teacher. Because for him, the matter is complete. He planted a seed. That seed may germinate tomorrow or 10 years later, when the disciple remembers that terrible moment and suddenly realizes that he has run away from the very lesson he needs most. Meditation is like that, when we are most afraid, when the door is opening the most. And sometimes, the most profound teaching comes in the form we least expect, a simple question, a paradoxical act, or even an utopian suggestion of beheading. But really, Cao Cho didn't ask to die. He asked his disciples to cut off attachment, cut down concepts, and break the duality between the sacred and the mundane. With just a moment of looking through the surface, his students could see the radical compassion behind the action. When we take care of others with mindfulness, we take care of ourselves. When we take care of ourselves with honesty, we are taking care of the whole world. The abbot's teachings, strange as they may be, are directed to this truth. All boundaries between ourselves and people, between teachers and students, between work and meditation, between morality and the worldly dissolve into the same stream, the flow of compassionate awareness. And finally, the only thing the story wants to tell us is, live by true knowledge, not by what we think is true. Because in the moment we really see, every teaching becomes a breath, every action becomes meditation, and even the craziest requests of the teacher become a touch of wisdom. In each person's silent journey towards awakening, there are moments when life seems to open a new door, inviting us to enter into a more authentic depth of ourselves. The story of the young man and the hermit by the mountain river is one such story, a lesson in the intensity and urgency that the spiritual path requires. Not a gentle curiosity or fleeting excitement, but a longing as deep, pristine, as pure as the last breath we try to find when we are in the water. Next to a crystal clear river in the remote mountains, where water flows through smooth rocks that have been honed by time, the hermit lived quietly for many years. He chose this place as his roof, not because of the separation, but because of the flow of water, the subtle changes of the seasons, the sounds of the wind and leaves. All are perfect mirrors of the subtle movements of his own mind. Many years passed. He sat and listened to the sound of the water and understood his thoughts, watched the change of seasons and realized that the seasons of internal transformation still took place silently. That morning, when the sun began to gently shine golden streaks on the canopy of the forest trees, the air smelled of mountain laurel after a long night. A young man appeared on the small road leading to the retreat. His clothes were dusty for a long time, but his eyes lit up strangely, the light of a man who was carrying a question bigger than himself. He stepped forward, bowed deeply, and said that he had traveled a long way just to meet the hermit. "Master," he said, heavy with sincerity, "I want to be your disciple." The hermit lifted his eyes, as calm as the river he had been following all seasons. "It's not that he's cold, nor he's strict, but for a man who has lived in nature for so long, his eyes can see through superficial desire and realize what is truly deep. He just asked, 'Why?' That question is coldly simple." The young man was a little confused. He thought about it carefully, trying to find a worthy answer, and finally he said, "Because I want to find God." He believes that is the noblest answer. But at that moment, what happened exceeded all his expectations. The hermit suddenly stood up, walked over quickly, and grabbed the boy by the collar. Without saying a word, he pulled him toward the flowing river. Before the boy could react, he was pushed into the cold water. The cold shock made his body numb. Then a strong force held his head under the water. It all happened so fast. In that moment, the thought dissipated. The ideal dissolves. Ambition dissipated. All that remains is the most primitive reflex, survival. The boy shook, his limbs swaying in despair. His lungs began to burn. Every second is endlessly long. The body screamed for air. Everything becomes a single cry in silence, breathing. When the hermit finally pulled him out of the water, the boy burst out in a violent cough, water gushing out of his mouth and nose like a cascade. He tried to breathe in the air as if it were the most precious thing in the world. His whole body trembled, but his consciousness was brighter than ever. As his breathing gradually returned, the hermit asked softly, "When you're underwater, what do you crave the most?" "Air," the boy breathed heavily, without hesitation. "There is only air." The hermit nodded slightly. He found what he wanted to see. "Good, come back, and only come back when I want to find God as much as I want air." Then he returned to his meditation seat, leaving the still trembling boy to face the experience of a death and a rebirth. After several minutes of silence, the boy understood that the lesson was not meant to punish him, nor was it cruel. It was an awakening fire. The fire required him to look back at his entire search engine. The spiritual path is not for curiosity or vague dreams. It requires a deep urgency, the urgency of the person who is falling into the abyss and needs something real, not beautiful words or ideas. The Buddha once taught that thousands of candles can be lit from a single candle without destroying it. But the original candle must actually burn, not flashy, not sparkling. Rather, it burns with the true flame of awakening. The story by the river sheds light on the difference between superficial desire and survival aspiration. The seeker thinks he wants to be enlightened, but all he has is a hobby. He wanted the awakening as an accessory to his life, not as life itself. Why do most of us approach the path of spiritual growth with such a weak commitment? Because first of all, we cling to familiar comfort. The ego is always afraid of being dismantled because it perceives it as death. Next, we are deceived by modern culture into thinking that enlightenment is a pleasant, gentle state that sparkles like a higher emotion. But the real masters all say enlightenment is a breakdown, a dismantling of illusions, a peeling of the skin. Third, we approach spirituality as a subfield, an item that adds to the to-do list. We collect countless techniques, follow retreats, workshops, awakening experiences, as if collecting badges. We forget that a single practice made with the whole heart is more powerful than 100 external experiences. The young man's near-drowning experience is a symbol of the dark night of the soul, when all familiar fulcrums are taken away, forcing us to face our true nature. It is in those moments that we know what we really value. Zen master Charlotte Joko Beck once said, "Practicing is not about reaching a particular state. Practice is the willingness to die to the person we think we are." That statement is the key to the lesson that the hermit gives. This intensity is not to make spiritual life grim, but to remind us that awakening requires full participation. Like a musician practicing day and night to reach the big stage, or a scientist dedicating himself to a discovery, the spiritual path requires equal devotion. The river in the story represents the flow of our minds, always moving on the surface, rarely showing us our own depth. When he is pushed into the water, he is forced to go into the unconscious zone, where the patterns that run our lives are hiding. Awakening can only occur when we dare to go so deep, with the same fierceness as the desire to seek the breath. And now, as night falls, as you sit in your own silence, you may ask yourself, what do I really want? Do I seek spirituality out of curiosity or for a deeper calling? If the truth is the breath, then how much did you want it? The Buddha said, the path is not in the sky, but in the heart. That path does not lead us to strange experiences, but to ourselves, but to the whole person, with the deepest sincerity, not half-heartedly. When we really want the truth as we want air, the door opens. The path is always there, waiting for me to enter, as long as we are urgent enough to begin. In the Eastern tradition of thought, where the line between philosophy and living experience often becomes blurred, there is a story that has transcended time to become a symbol for the inquiry into the self and the nature of consciousness. It is the story of the ancient sage Trangu, whose simple life almost dissolved into the stillness of nature and a spirit of relentless contemplation of the mysterious nature of reality. Trangu is not a noisy scholar, nor a fame seeker. He was known for his deep understanding of the world, an understanding that was not based on words or argument, but on the ability to see through the shell of phenomena, to touch the formless background on which all things arise. One morning, like many other days, Trangu left her small apartment and walked through the swaying bamboo forest under the gentle breeze. The morning light shone down on the upright bamboo stalks, reflecting glittering on the water of the small stream that ran along the path. Trangu observed all these things with an eye that did not seek, merely received. And it is in that reception that he feels the pulse of the universe in every breath. After wandering through the grass and letting his mind blend into the scenery, he stopped under a canopy of flowers in full bloom. The scent gently spreads in the wind, blending with the warmth of the midday sun, making the space extremely suitable for rest and relaxation. Trangu lay down, resting her head on the cool roots of the tree, the sound of the leaves vibrating, the occasional sound of birds ringing somewhere, and the steady rhythm of his own breath brought him into a deeper state of stillness. In that moment, His consciousness gently slipped away from his usual grasping and entered a vague space between sleep and wakefulness. And then, in the softness of sleep, something extraordinary happened. He felt that he was no longer human. Trangu's entire body, memories, and all traces as a philosopher dissolved into the void. Instead, he found himself transformed into a brilliant butterfly. At first, the transformation took place without the slightest surprise or resistance, because in the reality of the dream, there was no longer any concept of once being human. He, with his silky wings, glowing in color when he touched the sun, shook slightly and took off. Each flapping of the wings opens up a whole new area of sensation. The wind touches the thin scales, the light penetrates the wings, and the smell of flowers in the air becomes stronger than any human olfactory experience. As a butterfly, he flies among the spring flowers. He landed on a silky petal, pressed his tiny feet against the golden pollen, and then threw himself into the air again. There is no thought of the past. There is no notion of responsibility or philosophy. There is no distinction between subject and object. Perhaps most remarkable is the feeling of absolute freedom, a freedom not of thought but of pure instinct, a complete presence uninterrupted by the flow of thought. That butterfly didn't know that he was a butterfly, much less that he was a human. It merely lives in motion, in the warmth of the sun, in the sweetness of nectar. How long he exists in that form, an hour, a day, or an endless moment, is immeasurable, because time in dreams does not work in the usual way. But then, like the sudden appearance of the dream, the experience ended. Trang opened her eyes and found herself lying under a tree. The afternoon sky had changed slightly. The human body became familiar again. Mass, gravity, and heavy, rough sensations that the insect body didn't have. He sat up, adjusted his breathing, and watched the dissolution of the dream in his mind. The image of wings, the sun on the petals, the feeling of lightness, all are fading. But what remains is not the usual enjoyment or confusion about a vivid dream. The other thing is a question that shakes the whole foundation of self-awareness. Trang looked at the space in front of her and said softly, "I was just a man dreaming that I was a butterfly. Or am I a butterfly now dreaming that I am a man?" That question is not just a paradox or a philosophy of play. It opens up a fundamental problem. What is the fixed point of the me? Are there any fixed points? When he was a butterfly, the experience showed no signs of distinguishing it from reality. That state is unquestionably complete, seamless, and real. What, then, allows people to believe that the current state, being awake and identifying themselves as human, is more reliable, more sustainable, or more real? In the Buddha's teachings, all sentient matters are impermanent. Be diligent in alertness. That idea seemed to echo through Trangu's question. The identities that we often believe to be solid, names, memories, social roles, are really just constantly changing mental structures. They are not immutable entities, but more like waves that rise and then sink on the surface of the ocean. As a butterfly, he was a butterfly. As a person, he is completely human. But the fundamental nature, the space in which all perceptions arise, has never changed. When one looks closely, one can realize that the identity in each state of consciousness is not the same at all. We are different when we are awake, different when we dream, different in deep meditation, different in creative moments when the ego is almost gone. Which of those states is the real me? Or is that question inherently meaningless, because the true self is not a fixed form, but a process that constantly arises and dissolves? Zen masters liken the ego to the clouds in the sky, real in the moment it appears, but never separates from the sky, nor does it ever hold a fixed shape. The images in Trung's dreams open up the possibility that the boundaries that people often impose on themselves, the limits of their roles, the limits of their abilities, the limits of who they think they are just temporary structures. A dream can break down those structures to reveal a much broader nature of flexibility. Zen master Dogen once said, "To study the path is to study yourself. To study yourself is to forget yourself." When Trangu became a butterfly in a dream, he completely forgot who he was. And it is in that forgetfulness that another form of freedom is revealed. There are no more memories, no more roles, no more psychological references to which human consciousness clings. There is only an instantaneous, unsplit experience. That dream also reflects the teaching, color is empty, it's not a sight. Humans and butterflies both have when present in consciousness, but both are not in the sense that they do not have an independent, eternal nature of existence. Each form is only a temporary manifestation of awareness, like a bubble that rises from the surface of the sea and dissolves without leaving the sea. In retrospect, Trangu's question was not intended to determine whether he was really a human or a butterfly. It opens up a deeper layer, that perhaps every question of who I am is based on the false assumption that there must be a stable me to determine. On the path of meditation, the problem is not to find the true identity, but to see the hollow, naturally bright nature of awareness in which all identities arise and dissolve. If one observes oneself in daily life, one will realize that the change of the ego takes place continuously. Man in anger is not the same as man in love. People when they are tired are not the same as people when they are awake. Humans work differently than humans who are in the creative moment. Each state of consciousness creates a different me, and hundreds of those me rotate in a day that no one is really the same. So if all changes, what's left? The Zen tradition suggests that what remains is not a self, but a pure cognitive base, formless, unlimited, not belonging to any state of mind. When the dream about the butterfly dissolves, all that remains is the waking mind. When the state of wakefulness dissolves into sleep, all that remains is the ability to dream. When all experience dissolves in deep meditation, what remains is the immortal openness. When night comes, when people move from waking to dreaming, the boundaries between states of consciousness blur. It was in that moment of interference that Trangu's question became the easiest to feel. What guarantees that we are awake? What allows us to believe that the present experience is the ultimate reality? And what makes us sure that the identity we are holding is not just a fleeting image in the moving mental stream? One may not be able to find a definitive answer, but perhaps the purpose of the story is not to answer, but to break the certainty that the mind usually holds. When the ego becomes lighter, people can live more freely, not trapped in the limits of their own making. In the end, as many scriptures have reminded, everything is impermanent. Man dreams of being a butterfly. The butterfly dreams of being human. But it is the ability to dream, the ability to experience, the ability to know, that has never changed. It is as vast as the sky, and all forms appear in it, just like passing clouds. The question lingers in the stillness. Who are we? Humans, butterflies, or just the vast awareness of everything that arises and dissolves? And when that question subsides, there is only pure stillness, where there is no questioner, no idea to grasp at it, no form to discern, only the boundless sky of consciousness, always bright, always wide, always free. In the tranquil garden of a monastery deep in the middle of a misty-covered mountainside, where cherry blossom petals fall gently like the breath of heaven and earth, and the gentle wind whistles through the wind chimes hanging under the eaves, Master Seo is sitting silently by the stone porch. The morning light dyed his old brown shirt yellow, making him look like a natural part of the scenery, not separated, not striking, not fading. In front of him, the youngest, but also the most serious student of the monastery, was slowly approaching, a look that clearly showed the anxiety that had worn over him for months. The young monk spent many years diligently studying Buddhist philosophy. In his small library, he flipped through the pages of the classics, memorizing every passage about emptiness, about the nature of reality, about the illusion of the self. He can play endlessly on the relationship between form and emptiness, can participate in philosophical debates that last into the night, can analyze the layers of meaning of shunyata with almost scholarly precision. However, there is always a gap in his heart that is difficult to put into words. What he understood was in his mind, but not in his heart. The concepts he holds are like shadows of truth and not truth itself. He felt like he was talking about water instead of drinking water, drawing a map of the truth instead of entering the land of that truth. That morning, with hesitation but determination, he knelt down in front of Master Seo, bowed his head deeply, and spoke in a voice full of respect and disappointment. Master, I have been studying the teachings of emptiness for many years. I understand that all phenomena arise and disappear, that nothing has a permanent independent existence. But these things seem to be just concepts in my head. I know, but I don't really know. Please show me how to hold true emptiness. Master Seo looked at the student with the gentle eyes of someone who had witnessed this countless times. He understood the gap between knowledge and realization, between understanding by reason and understanding by experience. He knew the impatience and despair of the man who was trying to touch the untouchable with his mind. He simply said, "Show me how you can hold emptiness." The young monk pondered for a moment, then raised his hands in the air. He pinched his fingers gently, as if trying to hold on to an invisible fragile ball, afraid that with a little force it would shatter. He closed his hands, holding them firmly, his expression solemn and focused, his whole body and mind focused in an effort to prove his understanding. "Here, Master," he said quietly, "I'm holding the emptiness." Seo looked at the student's hands and shook his head slightly and smiled. "No," he said, in a voice as soft as the wind, but so clear that it startled the young monk. "I don't have anything in my hands. You're just holding the air and convincing yourself that it's something special." The young monk's face fell. He felt like the effort of years of learning and practicing became stupid in that moment. "Then please, sir," he said, his voice mixed with disappointment, "please show me a better way. How can one truly grasp emptiness?" Without saying another word, Master Seo reached out quickly, grabbed the young monk's nose, and gave him a tug. "Ah!" The cry came out unexpectedly. The monk reflexively hugged his nose, his eyes watering from pain. "Master! Why did you hurt me so much?" Seo let go of his hand, smiling brightly like a child who had just successfully mischievously played. "That," he said slowly, "is the empty hold." The monk stood dumbfounded, still rubbing his nose with one hand. His mind was completely chaotic. The sharp pain is real, too real to ignore. But what does it have to do with emptiness? What does it have to do with the shunyata you have spent so many years studying? Such a painful, vivid, and concrete feeling. How can it be empty? But then, as the initial pain began to subside, his understanding gradually moved. That pain, though real, doesn't last long. It does not exist independently. It is like a small wave that rises on the surface of the sea of consciousness. It rises from the nothingness, is very clearly present, and then dissolves back into that nothingness. The very moment he experiences it, no philosophy is present, no analysis intervenes, no ideas intervene. There is only pure feeling, a naked, non-conceptual truth. That is what he has forgotten for many years. In that painful moment, the person who experiences and what is experienced seem to be one. There is no distance. Emptiness suddenly ceased to be a philosophy, but became a reality. Everything is inherently empty, arises and ceases in every moment, is not fixed in nature, but is still fully present at the moment they appear. He remembered the teaching. The form is emptiness. The emptiness is the form. For many years, he has seen that sentence as a philosophical paradox that needs to be explained. Unexpectedly, the truth is so simple that A sore nose is pain. The pain is born, and then the pain dies. The pain does not leave a permanent trace. Being empty is not nothing. Emptiness is the basis for all phenomena that can arise and disappear. He suddenly realized that he saw emptiness as an object to be held, as a mass of knowledge to be enlightened. But emptiness is not something to be grasped. It is the space that allows everything to be grasped and then dissipated. Just as the sky is not a cloud, but without the sky no cloud exists. Just as the surface of the sea is not a wave, but without the sea no waves arise. Looking back at his mind, he saw that all thoughts were born and disappeared like cherry blossom petals falling to the ground. Where do the thoughts come from? Where do they disappear when they are turned off? They have no fixed start or end point. They just emerge from the void of awareness and then dissolve back into that void. Even the sense of a stable self is only a fleeting series of phenomena with no independent entity behind the control. Emptiness turns out not to be absolute emptiness, but the vibrancy of every moment, an infinite space in which every feeling, every sound, every thought can arise. It is not the absence of experience, but the true nature of experience. Master Seo did not give lectures, analyze concepts, and quote scriptures. He only tugged at his nose. And in that moment, he was pulled from the world of thought back to the world of reality, which he had forgotten in his indulgence in theory. The monk recalled the old teaching of Zen master Huang Ba. Fools reject what they see, not what they think. Wise people give up what they think, not what they see. He came to understand that over the years, he had rejected his own direct experience in favor of the concept of experience. He searches for the truth in books, but ignores the truth that is revealed in every breath, every step, every feeling. The emptiness he seeks is not an idea to hold on to, but the nature of every experience, right now, here. Being empty is not nothing. Emptiness is the boundless freedom of all phenomena, unbounded by any fixed nature. Emptiness is the background of awareness, the vast void in which everything appears and disappears like cherry blossom petals floating in the wind. The young monk slowly let go of his hand from his nose, looking at Master Seo, who was sitting as if he had never done anything but breathe and smile at the spring garden. In his heart, a new silence spread. He realized that the answer he had been looking for so long was not in the pages of books, nor in debate or analysis, but in every vivid moment of life. And that lesson, as simple but as sharp as a sudden jerk of the nose, opened another door for him to enter himself. He bowed his head deeply, no longer disappointed, no longer confused, only silent gratitude. In the garden, the cherry blossom petals fall again, melting into the wind as if they never existed, but still incredibly beautiful the moment they appear. And the young monk knows that he now understands one thing. In order to grasp emptiness, there is no need to hold on to anything. Just look directly at each moment that is happening within yourself and smile. In everyday life, although we rarely realize it, every moment is whispering the same lesson that the sages pointed out thousands of years ago. Anger, when it swirls within us, seems very real, very heavy, very strong, almost like a rock that lasts forever. But then, when the anger subsides, where does it go? It left no trace on the body, nor did it leave any shape in the mind other than a faint memory. The same goes for anxiety. When we're anxious, that feeling seems so important that it covers the whole world. It leads us to believe that what we fear most will inevitably happen, as if anxiety has the power to distort the future. But if we look closely, we will see that the essence of anxiety is just a series of fleeting images and sensations, with no fixed entity to cling to. Even the feeling of a me, the self that I thought was solid, familiar, unchanging, was not a motionless mass, but a process that was constantly moving. It was like a river. From a distance, it seemed to be a certain shape, but every drop of water in it was constantly changing. The Buddha said, "All conditions are impermanent. Be diligent in your salvation." And it is not a lofty philosophical statement, not the result of complex inferences, but a direct indication to the reality that is unfolding right now in our every breath. Everything we experience is empty in the sense that they do not have a separate nature that exists independently. At the same time, everything that arises is completely real the moment they appear. It is like the song of a bird in the early morning. It does not exist before it sounds. It ceases to exist after it is extinguished. But in the moment it is heard, it is real, alive, and complete. Tonight, when you sit down in some moment of silence, recognizing the thoughts that are fleeting in your mind, the sensations that are moving in your body, the sounds that are present around you, can you feel the empty space that Master Seo once pointed to? It is not the sad emptiness of a place where there is nothing, but the infinite void in which everything arises. It's not the abstraction. It's the space that your whole life is opening up. Can you feel that this emptiness is inseparable from the fullness of experience, but, on the contrary, is the deepest essence of all experience? The Buddha once mentioned that in the sky, there is no distinction between east and west. It is man who sets boundaries in his mind and then believes them to be real. Emptiness, the emptiness of all phenomena, is not something that we must achieve or understand for grandeur. It is what everything is. The only thing that keeps us from realizing it is the habit of trying to grasp it with our minds, trying to define, trying to possess. But the nature of emptiness can only be realized when we let go of all efforts to grasp and allow ourselves to be held by it. And as if to deepen that lesson, the ancients tell a different story, the story of the courage to let go, to trust in the unpredictable flow that will take you. It is a story called Crystal River. At the depths of a crystal river, so clear that you can see through the tiny pebbles lying at the bottom, there is a small village, not of humans, but of tiny creatures that live in the water. That river flows softly through distant lands, carrying with it the memories of countless springs and oceans. All the inhabitants of that village, young and old, strong and weak, lived by clinging tightly to rocks, to tree roots, to pieces of rotten wood lying still under the water. Since their ancestors, they have believed that clinging is the only way to survive. Hold on, the elders always say. The flow is dangerous. If you let go, you will be swept away to places that no one knows. Safety is only here, where you are familiar. But among these creatures, there is a small, gentle, but curious individual who is increasingly tired of this endless clinging. Day after day, he looked at the flow above and saw that it moved smoothly, full of energy and serenity. While his neighbors complained about having to strain himself to cling to the rocks, he wondered what it would be like to let go of the water. When, do you think, this water has its own wisdom? When did he know where he was going to take you? One morning, in a moment of determination that he himself did not understand why it came to him, he said loudly, "I am tired of clinging. I don't know where the current will take me, but I believe it knows its way. I'm going to let go. I want to live rather than die in a safety where I no longer feel meaningful." The other creatures panicked. "You're crazy," they cried. "Letting go is finding your own way to death. The water will throw you into the rocks to crush the butterflies. You will be dragged away like a dry leaf. Don't be foolish." But the creature was determined. He looked at them one last time, then gently let go of the tentacles that were wrapped around the familiar stone. In the blink of an eye, the water engulfed him with such force that he couldn't breathe. He was thrown from stone to stone, his little body hitting the bottom of the river in numbing pain. Every time he hit, he felt like he was going to die. But in the midst of that violent whirlwind, something strange happened. When he deliberately didn't cling to anything, when he allowed the water to do what it wanted, the water began to lift him out of the dangerous depths. First a little, then more, until the rocks at the bottom no longer reach him. And then he began to drift, not tossed around as he had at first, but drifting softly to the rhythm of the current. He was no longer against it. He blended into it as if he were part of the water. As he drifted to farther regions, other creatures saw him from the bottom and gasped in amazement. They had never seen anyone of their species fly in the water like that. For them, it is not a natural thing, but a miracle. "One of us," they cried. "But he's flying. Surely it is the Savior." The creature that was drifting with the stream heard, and he felt a deep pity. "I'm not a savior," he said, his voice echoing through the water. "I'm just one of you. The river lifted me up, not because I was special, but because I dared to let go. This flow is for all of us." But they don't listen or don't want to hear. They shouted louder, and as they hailed him as their savior, their hands clung more tightly to their own stones. When the creature gradually disappears after a twist, the story of him immediately becomes a legend, then an anecdote for the whole village. He is spoken as a rare, miraculous character, a grace that the river has only bestowed once. No one mentions that he just does one simple thing: let go. Like that story, the Buddha's teachings remind us that you only lose what you cling to. A profound paradox lies at the heart of human experience. We try to be secure and in control, but it is in that attachment that we create suffering. We cling to familiar things just because they are familiar, even though sometimes they themselves have become cramped and irrelevant. We think that holding on tight means being safe, but in fact, it's how we put ourselves in a position to confront the truth of life. Everything changes. From an early age, we've been taught that the familiar is safe and the unknown is scary. This conditioning follows us into adulthood, causing us to hold on to jobs that no longer make us happy, relationships that have lost their lives, old versions of ourselves that are no longer relevant. We cling to the ego as if it were unchanging, while life is a constant flow. And every time we try to hold on, we are struck by the current against the rocks of resistance. The Buddha said that nothing is permanent but change. Water does not fight against the ridge, it just quietly finds its own way. And if we learn to be like water, we will see that life is not against us. It just invites us to let go of our fears, to let go of what is too tight, too old, to be lifted, to be taken further, like that little creature that has been lifted from the bottom of the rocks. Tonight, as you lie still and let your breath return to nature, you can quietly ask yourself, what can I let go? Maybe it's an anxiety that's filling your mind, a lingering anger, an expectation of yourself that's too small for who you're becoming. Do you feel the current inviting you to let go of your clenched hands? Letting go of the past. Let go of the future. Letting go of the present moment that we are trying to define. Relax and let the flow of life take hold of you. It is in that trust that we realize that what we once feared would destroy us is actually the power that will bring us back to our true nature, free, open, and in constant motion like a river of crystal itself. In ancient Japan, during a period of turmoil and incessant war between hostile clans, there was a talented warrior who had experienced countless fierce battles with a resilient spirit and absolute loyalty to his master. But then, in a decisive battle, fate was not on his side. As his teammates fall around one after another, defeat becomes inevitable. He himself was captured by the enemy, dragged out of the battlefield, stripped of all weapons and armor, things that used to help him feel confident and safe. That night, he was thrown into a dark, cramped cell with thick stone walls that seemed to be pressing on him from all sides. The heavy wooden door slammed shut, echoing a cold sound that pierced his bones like the end of his freedom and hope. Darkness gradually enveloped the prison cell, and in that quiet space, the warrior's mind began to race with terrifying fears. He thought about tomorrow, the day he knew would not bring anything good. According to the customs of war, detainees would undergo uncompromising interrogation, forcing the secrets of their lord's defenses, troops, and strategic plans. When he resolutely refused to reveal anything, the torture would begin. Hot iron whips, sharp pieces of bamboo poking into his nails, and many other brutal methods he had heard his fellow warriors recount in peacetime. Their voices were deep and haunting. When the torturers had sucked up all they could, or when they were tired of his silence, they would execute him as a lesson for others. Those images gradually appeared clearly in the warrior's mind, making his heart beat so fast that it felt like it was going to burst. His breathing became hurried, shallow, and panting, sweat drenching his forehead, even though it was a cool night outside. Sleep, a necessary respite for physical recovery, was now impossible, as his mind was occupied by painful, vivid scenarios of tomorrow, a day that brought imminent doom. He walked back and forth in the small cell, then sat against the cold stone wall, or lay down on the rough straw that covered the floor. Nothing in the prison cell could soothe his mind, writhing with terror. The images of torture and death kept repeating themselves like a nightmare with no way out. Then, in a moment of utter despair, a faint light flashed in the warrior's mind. He suddenly remembered the gentle and profound words of the old Zen master who had taught him at the monastery before he became a warrior. Those words echoed clearly, as if his master was sitting beside him in that cold cell. "Tomorrow is not real," he said. "It's just an illusion. The only reality is now." That teaching initially caused the warrior's mind to resist fiercely. How can tomorrow be an illusion when every threat is clear, concrete, and seemingly inevitable? But then, when he sat quietly, letting go of his chaotic thoughts, letting the teachings penetrate deep into every corner of his soul, he began to realize something different. He paid attention to his breath, the breath that was happening, steady, gentle. In that moment, he felt a strange comfort. He could feel the straw beneath him, rough but unpleasant, and the gentle sound of the wind through the trees outside the prison windows, as if a reminder of a natural world that is still functioning, still continuing its cycle, despite war and human hatred. In that moment, the warrior is no longer a victim of torture or death. He is simply a man sitting in a cell, alive, awake, and present. The horrors that had weighed on him turned out to be just thoughts of a future that were not real, existing only in his imagination. The more he understood that, a deep peace gradually spread in his soul. The breathing became slower, deeper, and the heart beat steadily, no longer panicking. For the first time after his arrest, he smiled, a smile of deliverance. Not from the prison walls, but from the mental prison, where anxious thoughts of tomorrow had once imprisoned him in misery. In just those few short minutes, the warrior fell into a peaceful sleep, a sleep that was no longer tormented by darkness. The Buddha once taught, "If you want to know your past, look at your present state. If you want to know your future, look at your current actions." This teaching sheds light on the truth that the warrior discovered in that cold cell, that the only moment in which we are truly alive is the present moment. Why do we torture ourselves with countless gloomy scenarios about the future that hasn't yet arrived? Zen Buddhism explains that our minds are inherently a survival mechanism, evolving over millions of years to constantly detect danger and plan defenses. In many cases, this mechanism helps us survive emergency situations. But when it is overactivated, when we confuse fantasies about the future with the reality at hand, it becomes a source of suffering. Look at yourself. How many times your anxiety stems from vivid scenarios in your head about an important presentation, the results of a medical test, or an upcoming difficult conversation that actually exist mostly in your imagination? Never materialized? The warrior's story teaches us that we can recognize and prepare for future challenges without being overwhelmed and drained by energy. Planning and preparation are necessary, but when they become an obsession that takes away the peace of the present, we are trapped in another prison, no less cramped and confined than the stone cell. As the Vietnamese Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh once taught, Thanks to impermanence, everything is possible. The future has yet to be written, shaped by causes and conditions that we cannot predict or fully control. The anxious mind often assumes that the current difficulty will last forever or get worse, but the truth is that it all changes. The warrior in his cell could not know what would happen tomorrow. Maybe his master would send troops to the rescue, or maybe the enemy would show mercy, or maybe negotiations would bring him freedom. The Buddha also emphasized, the past has passed, the future has not yet come, and there is only one moment for you to live. That teaching does not mean that we neglect our responsibility for the future, or that we do not plan properly. Rather, it invites us to realize that our minds are constantly forgetting the present, to fall into useless worries about what has not yet happened, thereby losing the fullness and richness of the moment itself. In the practice of meditation, we cultivate the so-called beginner's mind, approaching each moment with freshness, unbound by old assumptions and anxieties. When we live fully in the present, we often discover a treasure of peace and clarity that anxious thoughts can never bring. Imagine the change in the warrior's perception. The same body, the same uncertain future, but only by returning to the present moment, he transforms pain into peace. That transformation is always present, always able to grasp in every moment of our worries and fears. Tonight, as you realize your mind is weaving anxious stories about the future, remember the captured warrior and the meditator's words of wisdom. Ask yourself, what is really happening right now? Simple experiences like breathing, the feeling of sitting in a chair, or the temperature of the air around you can all help you anchor yourself back to reality, rather than being dragged away in an imaginary maze. As the Buddha taught, don't live in the past, don't dream about the future, but focus your mind on the present moment. It is in that doctrine that we find the key that opens the door of the warrior's prison and of ourselves, the door to inner freedom, where true peace begins. As we continue our journey of discovering the wisdom of Zen Buddhism, there is a simple but profound story of a fundamental truth that we often overlook. A truth that surrounds us, present in every moment but invisible to the naked eye. It is the story of the small fish and the vast ocean. In the vast depths of the Pacific Ocean, where sunlight penetrates the gentle blue waters, where coral gardens sway in the gentle current, a juvenile fish swims relentlessly back and forth in its familiar waters. Even though it was surrounded by the magical life of the ocean, schools of silver fish gleaming like liquid metal, sea urchins dancing in the water, and the rhythmic sound of waves lapping in the distance, the juvenile still felt a deep confusion, a persistent question in his mind. One day, as he swam close to an old sea turtle with a shell covered with scars from countless long journeys across the vast ocean, the young fish asked earnestly, "Elder, I heard other sea creatures talk about something called the ocean, and they talk about it with reverence, as if it were the most important thing in life. But I searched all over here, and I couldn't find the ocean anywhere. Really, what is the mystery that everyone talks about?" The deep, patient, and warm eyes of an old turtle look at the young fish with tender joy. "Little one," the turtle replied in a soft, sad voice of decades of storm and quiet, "the ocean is what surrounds you on every side, every moment you live." The young fish listened to the words and looked around in panic, hurriedly rushed to the left, swam to the right, rose to the distant surface of the water, and then dived to the bottom of the sand at its feet again. "But I don't see anything around but water, fish, plants, and rocks. Where do you say the ocean is? Why can't you see it?" The turtle sighed, sitting more comfortably on the silky kelp bed, knowing that this was a moment for teaching, requiring great patience. "Of course, you can't see the ocean, because the ocean exists both inside and outside you. I was born in the ocean. I breathe the ocean. I was raised by the ocean. And one day, I will return to the ocean. The ocean flows through your baby's gills and surrounds your body naturally, like scales covering your skin. It's so much a part of me that I can't recognize it anymore. It's become invisible. The young fish stopped, began to feel something vast and deep, a reality that had existed for a long time but had not yet been named. You mean the water you're swimming through? Is that the ocean? The turtle nodded, confirming. I have never been separated from the ocean, not in any moment of my existence. As the Buddha once said, everything that is conditioned is impermanent. Strive to be aware of that. This ancient wisdom illuminates our magical relationship with the immense flow of existence, a current that permeates everything, but is largely ignored in the rhythm of our daily lives. The story evokes a profound teaching about the nature of spiritual blindness. Just as fish cannot see the ocean that surrounds us, we too live immersed in the sacredness of life, but do not realize it, because it is so close, so continuous, and so fundamental to our existence that we think of it as a separate entity. So why do we struggle to perceive that towel, the universal flow that sustains and surrounds it all? Zen Buddhism points out that our habit is to seek out the extraordinary, the mysterious, while ignoring the simplest and closest things. We imagine spiritual truth to be something dramatic, mystical, or completely separate from everyday experiences. We seek God in the burning bushes of the Sinai desert while forgetting the divine presence in our morning cup of coffee, in the breath that enters our lungs, or in the morning light. It is in the breath, in the simple but miraculous event of awakening, that the manifestation of the veil, the basic flow of life, takes place so subtly and continuously. The change of seasons, our sleep cycles, our heartbeats, the emergence and dissolution of thought in consciousness, they are all manifestations of the same organizational principle, a pattern that permeates from the spiral of galaxies to the tiny fern leaf. This is a pattern that repeats itself at every scale of existence. Look around every day and you'll notice this basic flow that we often don't notice. The way traffic organizes itself naturally, even when no one is in charge. How conversations find their own rhythm and timing. The way that your body breathes without conscious control. Or how solutions to complex problems seem to arise spontaneously from somewhere other than deliberate thinking. They are all manifestations of the scarf working through apparent chaos to create spontaneous order. Zen master Alan Watts once taught that trying to identify yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. The same is true of the scarf. It cannot be grasped or contained because we are its manifestation, not individual observers. Every attempt to understand the scarf through conceptual thinking is like a fish trying to get out of the ocean to observe it objectively. This is not to say that the scarf is just an abstract philosophical concept. On the contrary, it is the most essential direct reality that we can experience. That intelligence coordinates the trillions of cells in your body, the awareness where all thoughts and feelings appear. That life force enlivens everything, from redwood trees to the tiniest bacteria. In Chinese philosophy, the character Tao literally means a path or path, but this is not the way we go to some distant destination. It is the path that passes through us, the way reality unfolds moment by moment, without our control or management. The Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu wrote, "The Tao that can be said is not the eternal Tao." But even so, we have to use words to refer to the unspeakable. This is the beautiful paradox of spiritual teaching. We have to use the limitations of words to look towards the infinite, knowing that the finger pointing to the moon is never the moon. Tonight, as you feel the gentle breath moving in and out of your body without conscious control, can you recognize the scarf manifesting itself through this simple miracle? Can you sense in this automatic process the same intelligence that moved the planets and changed the seasons? The Buddha taught, look inward. You are a Buddha. You are inseparable from the ocean of existence, nor a wave that is inseparable from the sea. When we realize this fundamental non-separation, we stop looking for the outer scarf and begin to live as a conscious expression of it. Since then, life is no longer an endless journey of search, but a complete existence in each moment. This story opens up a new horizon in the spiritual journey, the difference between technical mastery and true self-mastery. But that's a different story to be told next time, as we continue to delve deeper into the mysteries of ourselves in this vast universe. There is a young man, full of enthusiasm and passion, who has spent many years of his life perfecting his archery skills. Every day, he practices hard, regardless of the sun, rain, or cold wind. His dedication was unwavering, his focus so steadfast that nothing seemed to distract him. The bow and arrow in his hand seemed to be a part of his body. His shots were not only accurate, but also so subtle that he rarely missed the target, even when shooting at the farthest distances. His technique has become so perfect that no one in the region can deny his talent. News of the boy's extraordinary abilities spread throughout the surrounding lands. He began to participate in and win archery competitions one after another, and each victory seemed to fuel his pride and confidence. Gradually, success and fame make the boy blush with pride, maybe a little drunk in his own glory. But the passion didn't allow him to stop. He decides to look for one last challenge to claim his position as the greatest archer in this vast land. He hears whispered stories about an old Zen master who lives high in the mountains, one who is not only famous for his profound spiritual wisdom, but also possesses legendary archery skills. It is rumored that no one has ever defeated him in any fight. That mountain was the retreat of the master, who was revered for his perfect combination of tranquility of soul and mastery of bow and arrow technique. I will challenge him, the young man thought, and when I defeat him, everyone will know that I am the greatest archer in all this region. With iron determination, he set out, crossing winding roads to the top of the mountain where the Zen master lived. He found his modest abode, a small house tucked away among dense trees and rocks. Challenging the confidence of youth, he said in a firm and somewhat proud voice, "Old man, I have heard of your reputation for archery skills. I challenge you to prove if your skills can match mine." The teacher, with his old eyes full of wisdom and deep peace, only nodded gently in acceptance of the challenge. Without further words, the young man immediately prepared for his technical performance. He picks a target at a considerable distance, draws his bow, and tensions the bowstring with a precision that he has practiced countless times. The arrow flew away like a needle, straight and precise, piercing the center of the target with a satisfied thump that echoed in the quiet air of the mountains and forests. Not stopping, he continued to draw his bow, aim, and shoot the second arrow, and the magic happened when the second arrow pierced straight into the middle of the first arrow, marking a technical feat that few archers in the world can do. The boy turned to the teacher with bright eyes, his chest swelling with pride. He said, "This is my performance. Let's see if you can do the same." However, the Zen master did not immediately withdraw his bow in response. Instead, he smiled softly, his eyes sparkling with quiet joy, and waved to the boy to follow him. "Come on," he said softly. "Let's find a more suitable place for this performance." Curious and still full of confidence, the young man followed the teacher up a winding mountain road. The higher he climbed, the thinner the air became, and the path became more rugged. Eventually, they arrived at a place that surprised the boy, a deep abyss that smoked and divided the mountain, below which was a dark abyss where the bottom of the abyss disappeared into the darkness. Joining the two sides of the abyss is a single poured log, narrow and fragile, weathered over time and somewhat precarious. It serves as a single bridge across this terrifying abyss. Without saying a word, the Zen master calmly walked up the narrow wooden bridge. His movements were not hurried, but very graceful, gentle and completely comfortable, despite the obvious danger of death around him. When he reached the point in the middle of the bridge where the log sagged slightly and began to shake under his weight, he stopped and turned around, directing his gaze towards a distant tree at the other end of the abyss. With the same skill as standing in the familiar garden, the Zen master drew his bow, aimed, and shot his arrow. The arrow flew through the vast expanse of space, crossing the abyss and hitting the tree trunk firmly. The arrow was not necessarily more accurate than the young man's arrow, but this shot in difficult conditions showed mastery and bravery far beyond pure technique. Then the teacher walked back to the solid ground, looked at the young man, and motioned for him to step onto the wooden bridge. "Now, it's your turn," he said simply. The boy approached the edge of the abyss, his eyes staring down into the smoking abyss. His palms began to sweat, and his legs trembled incessantly. The thought of having to step on that narrow and precarious bridge scared him so much that he was paralyzed. All the skills and confidence he had in his safe environment seemed to dissipate in this moment, in the face of primal fear and existential danger. He tried to force himself to move forward, but his body and mind refused to cooperate. His hands were shaking so much that he couldn't hold his bow, much less concentrate on aiming as accurately as before. The steady breathing and concentration that had always helped him succeed in ideal conditions now left him entirely. The Zen master observed the young man's struggle with eyes full of compassion and deep understanding. He said softly, "I have developed great skills with the bow, but I have very little skill to relax my mind when shooting." He continued, "As the Buddha taught, the mind is everything, what you think you're going to be." This ancient wisdom pointed out the difference between mastering a technique and mastering the mind in using it. Why do we often confuse technical proficiency with true proficiency? Zen Buddhism points to the tendency of people to focus on external achievements, surface skills, while forgetting about inner development, the very factor that creates the true value and meaning of those achievements. We often practice and perfect our skills in a controlled environment, where things go the way we want them to. But when faced with uncertainty, danger, or real challenges, the limitations of our inner bravery are clearly revealed. The young archer has honed great technical skills, but only in perfect and familiar conditions. When things change, when fear enters the mind, when life and safety become an issue, that carefully cultivated skill disappears. The young man's mastery was exposed as shallow, relying too much on external circumstances instead of internal stability. Take a look at your own life. When faced with pressure, great challenges, or unfamiliar circumstances, do you still maintain the same abilities, skills, or confidence as you would in a safe environment? Or are we like the guy on the bridge? Those skills collapse when the real challenge arises. In the practice of Zen, we cultivate a quality called unshakable presence, the ability to stay focused and effective, no matter how difficult, dangerous, or stressful the situation may be. This does not mean getting rid of fear or challenge, but rather developing inner stability that is large enough to be able to act skillfully and accurately, even in a state of fear or confusion. The Zen master's performance was not meant to show off his outstanding archery skills. Instead, he reveals the profound difference between skill based on ideal conditions and skill that arises from true inner mastery. His arrow was not necessarily more accurate than the young man's, but it was released from a place of inner peace and balance. The Zen master once taught, the unborn Buddha's mind can handle all situations. This is the quality of a constant, solid awareness, whether we are archery in the garden or standing on a rugged cliff. The difference between confidence comes from controlling the environment, and confidence from a deep belief in one's own ability to respond wisely to every challenge. The Buddha also said, "Better than 1,000 empty words is a word that brings peace." An arrow fired from true presence and inner stability is worth more than 1,000 arrows fired from the conceited ego under carefully controlled conditions. True mastery is not expressed in the perfection of our environment, but in our ability to maintain our center when everything around us is uncertain, chaotic, and challenging. Take a deep look at your relationship with challenges and fears. Where in life do you shine in a safe environment, but fall down when faced with difficult or unforeseen situations? It's not a failure, but a lesson in where you need to dig deeper and practice more. On this evening, as you reflect on the skills and abilities that have developed, make a clear distinction between which skills depend on perfect conditions and which ones remain steadfast under pressure. You can feel the difference between the confidence that comes from avoiding challenges and the confidence that comes from facing challenges with a deep spiritual presence. The Buddha's wisdom reminds us that the chaos inherent in all complex systems is natural. Make an effort diligently and persistently. Life is like a bridge across the abyss, uncertain, sometimes frightening, and always requires us to find balance, not on solid ground, but in the very way we walk through that challenging space. True mastery is not about hitting the perfect target, but about maintaining balance and stability wherever you are standing. In a bustling quarry at the foot of towering mountains, a master sculptor moves quietly among the white marble blocks, his eyes containing the refinement of a man who has spent decades soothing the beauty hidden in the rock. The morning light penetrated the space, covering the rocks with golden light, making them seem to whisper mysterious stories, profound invitations to him. Each stone seems to carry its own soul, an untapped potential, and the sculptor, with his wind and patience hands, always knows how to listen and recognize it. He stopped in front of a large stone, gently caressed the smooth surface, and said softly, "Aha! In this stone there is a hero, and in the other is a trapped saint." This is what has made his reputation over the years, his ability to understand the innermost nature of each stone. Seeing inside the raw material, a perfect image was waiting to be released. Not just stones, but hidden souls, untold stories, spiritual figures waiting for his skillful hand to come back to life. But this morning, the sculptor's heart carries a different weight, heavier than ever. For more than 40 years, he had been in constant search for a special stone, a perfect stone from which he could create the greatest masterpiece of his life, a glorious Buddha statue. This was his dream and his mission. But now, the energy seemed to be running out, and the ideal stone kept hiding from his sight. He traveled to every major quarry around the world, consulted experts, hired searchers, and scoured remote areas. But nowhere was there a perfect stone to satisfy his heart, to help him release the image of the Buddha in his mind. The sense of frustration and heaviness of the unfinished mission led him to gradually seek comfort and guidance from a local Zen monk who headed a small temple at the end of the street where he lived. The humble pagoda, with its peaceful garden, where an ancient stone well covered with green moss was his destination. The sculptor bowed deeply to his master, his heart filled with reverence and hope. "I have spent 40 years searching for the perfect stone to depict the Buddha." The master listened with gentle eyes, with a gentle smile, which made the sculptor feel both confused and hopeful. "No problem," he said simply. "You mean you want to know where that perfect stone is so that I can release the image of the Buddha in my dreams?" "Exactly," the sculptor replied, in a voice full of excitement. The master pointed to a corner of the courtyard where the ancient stone well lay, and the green moss quietly covered the wall of the well. "Over there," he said. The sculptor hurriedly approached the well, looking down at the crystal clear water, the dim darkness reflecting his image with questioning eyes, and a face that had been imprinted with time and countless years of searching. But what surprised him was that the reflection was himself. A seeker, an artist, a soul full of aspirations. And in that moment, he understood that all he was looking for, all that he wanted from that perfect stone, was actually not somewhere far away, but right where he stood in his own reflection. The Buddha's wisdom reminds us that if we cannot find the truth where we stand, where else can we expect to find it? This profound lesson shows that what we desperately seek is not something that exists in a distant place, an ideal situation, or some perfect material, but it is always in the very foundation of people, in the deep essence of each individual. Why are we so exhausted searching everywhere except within ourselves? Zen Buddhism points out that we are often so focused on the object we are looking for that we forget to look back at the person we are looking for. The sculptor examined thousands of stones, traveled countless miles, but never thought that his own consciousness, the mind that makes the search, was the perfect material to awaken and create a masterpiece. Looking back at yourself, have you ever put off your joy and satisfaction all day just to wait for a better situation? I'll be happy when I'm promoted, when I find the right partner, when all the conditions are perfect in the end, you might think. But it's an endless form of searching, going around looking for the Buddha stone without ever realizing that it's reflecting within you right now. Zen master Hangpo once taught that your daily mind is the path. The sculptor suddenly realized that he didn't need to be something different, but that he needed to realize that he was exactly what he was looking for. The perfect material for expressing Buddha nature does not come from outside, not some stone, but lies in our own awareness, insight, and creativity. The well is like a symbol of the point of stillness in consciousness, where the journey of search ends and the journey of awareness begins. When we stop looking outward and instead turn to the depths of awareness, we discover that the seeker and the object sought are inherently one. In the practice of Zen, we speak of the primordial face, the essential essence that exists before being conditioned, shaped by society, by thoughts and emotions. That original face is not hidden in any particular place, but is always present, always looking back at us through every mirror, every moment of real presence. Tonight, as you face the reflection of your self-seeking mind, you may realize that the Buddha nature has always been with you, present in the possibility of wonder, in the desire for the truth, or simply in the awareness of these very words. The Buddha once taught, "Look inward. You are the Buddha." The masterpiece you're looking for isn't the perfect materials waiting somewhere out there. It awaits the recognition that the artist, the artwork, and the ability to judge beauty are all expressions of the same essential nature. As our journey draws to a close, take a moment to feel the gentle release that pervades your soul. Do you notice the subtle shift from clinging to letting go? The deep stillness you have just touched is not some distant shore that you have landed on, but a gentle current that is always flowing within you, waiting for you to stop struggling and let go. The Buddha once taught, "Don't live in the past. Don't dream about the future. Focus your mind on the present." That wisdom is like a red thread through every story we have heard. It reminds us that the burden we carry does not come from the event or circumstance itself, but from clinging, from our grip on yesterday's pain and worrying about tomorrow. Each story serves as a quiet invitation for you to open your fingers, to let go of what you are holding, and to discover the lightness that comes from living fully in this moment, as it is. Even when the mind wanders, which is inherently natural, the knowledge you have just cultivated is always a part of you, a quiet, deep well to which you can return whenever you need to. As you prepare to take a deep break from your sleep, remember that ancient stories don't teach you a new skill, but rather remind you of your innate ability, the ability to let go. They light up the path back to your own center, where deep stillness exists beneath the shell of thought and worry. In the silence that followed my voice, just rested in that awareness. Pay attention to the gentle breathing, the feeling of the body relaxing, and the quiet contentment of the free soul. These teachings are not memories of the past, but living truths that have as profound meaning for today as they have for generations. That wisdom is not in complex ideas, but in the simple, direct experience of non-clinging. And tonight, you felt that truth for yourself. As you drift from this tranquility into sleep, and then from sleep back to waking life, take this sense of liberation with you. Let it be a silent companion, a source of strength that reminds you that you are the master of peace of mind. Thank you for accompanying us on this journey at the Monk Tells Bedtime Stories. Sleep well and peacefully.